Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. The Batman 2022 Movie Review. The Batman is a 2022 American superhero film directed by Matt Reeves from a screenplay he wrote with Peter Craig. Based on the DC Comics character Batman, it is a reboot of the Batman film franchise. Robert Pattinson stars as Bruce Wayne/Batman alongside Zoë Kravitz, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, Peter Sarsgaard, Andy Serkis, and Colin Farrell. The film sees Batman, in his second year fighting crime in Gotham City, uncover corruption with ties to his own family while pursuing the Riddler, Dano, a mysterious serial killer targeting the city's elite. Warner Bros. Pictures distributed the film, which Reeves and Dylan Clark produced for DC Films. A Batman film for the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, franchise was announced in October 2014, with Ben Affleck starring as the character. He signed on to also direct, produce, and co-write The Batman by 2016, but had reservations about the project and stepped down in January 2017. Reeves took over the following month and reworked the story, removing the DCEU connections to focus on a younger version of the character earlier in his vigilante career compared to Affleck's portrayal. Reeves worked on the script with Craig and Mattson Tomlin, and sought to explore Batman's detective aspects more than previous films, drawing inspiration from the films of Alfred Hitchcock and the New Hollywood era, and comics such as Year One, 1987, The Long Halloween, 1996-97, and Ego, 2000. Following Affleck's departure as the star in January 2019, Pattinson was cast in May, and additional actors joined later that year. Filming took place from January 2020 to March 2021 and was halted for several months due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The production occurred throughout the United Kingdom, with location shooting in England and Scotland, as well as on sound stages at Warner Bros. Studios Leavesden. Cinematographer Greg Fraser shot the film with industrial light and magic stagecraft virtual production technology, while Michael Giacchino composed the musical score. The film has over 1,500 visual effects shots and is one of the longest superhero films ever made. The Batman used an extensive viral marketing campaign during and after production. After facing multiple delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, The Batman was theatrically released in the United States on March 4, 2022, 3 days after premiering at the Lincoln Center in New York City. The film received positive reviews from critics, with praise for Reeves's approach, the performances of Pattinson and Kravitz, and the cinematography and score, although the tone, runtime, and third act received some criticism. Batman's depiction and characterization prompted critical analysis from several commentators, as did themes exploring class conflict and inequality. It was a commercial success, grossing over $772 million worldwide against a $185 to $200 million budget, making it the seventh highest grossing film of 2022 and Warner Bros.' highest grossing pandemic release. Its financial performance set several pandemic-era box office records, particularly for IMAX screenings. The film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and received numerous other accolades. The Batman is intended to start a trilogy and a shared universe called the Batman Epic Crime Saga. A sequel, The Batman, Part 2, is scheduled for release on February 18, 2028, while a spin-off television series starring Farrell, The Penguin, debuted on HBO in late 2024. On Halloween, Gotham City Mayor Don Mitchell Jr. is murdered by a masked serial killer, the Riddler. Reclusive billionaire Bruce Wayne, who has operated for 2 years as the vigilante Batman, investigates the murder alongside Lieutenant Jim Gordon, much to the disdain of the Gotham City Police Department, GCPD. The Riddler leaves a message for Batman at the crime scene. The following night, the Riddler kills the police commissioner, Pete Savage, and leaves another message for Batman. Batman and Gordon discover that the Riddler left a thumb drive in Mitchell's car containing images of Mitchell's affair with a woman, Annika Kosalov, At the Iceberg Lounge, a nightclub operated by the Penguin, crime boss Carmine Falcone's lieutenant. While questioning the Penguin, who pleads ignorance, Batman notices that Annika's roommate, Selina Kyle, works at the club as a waitress. Annika disappears. While searching for answers, Batman and Selina discover that Savage and Mitchell were on Falcone's payroll, as is District Attorney Gil Colson. The Riddler abducts Colson, straps a timed collar bomb to his neck, and sends him to interrupt Mitchell's funeral. When Batman arrives, the Riddler calls him via a phone duct taped to Colson and threatens to detonate the bomb if Colson cannot answer 3 riddles. Colson refuses to answer the third, the name of the informant who gave the GCPD information that led to a historic drug bust ending mob boss Salvatore Maroni's operation, and is killed. Batman and Gordon deduce that the informant may be the Penguin and track him to a drug deal. They discover that Maroni's operation was transferred to Falcone, with many corrupt officers involved. Selina inadvertently exposes them when she arrives to steal money and discovers Annika's corpse in the trunk of a car. Batman captures the Penguin after a car chase, but he and Gordon learn that the Penguin is not the informant. Batman and Gordon follow the Riddler's trail to the ruins of an orphanage initially funded by Bruce's deceased parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, where they learn that the Riddler holds a grudge against the Wayne family for failing the orphanage. Bruce's butler and caretaker, Alfred Pennyworth, is hospitalized after opening a letter bomb addressed to Bruce. The Riddler leaks evidence that Thomas, who was running for mayor before he was murdered, hired Falcone to kill a journalist whom Maroni controlled and was writing a story about Martha's family history of mental illness. Bruce confronts Alfred, who maintains that Thomas only asked Falcone to threaten the journalist into silence. Upon learning that Falcone had murdered the journalist, Thomas planned to turn both himself and Falcone over to the police. Alfred believes that Falcone had Thomas and Martha killed to silence them. Selina reveals to Batman that Falcone is her father. After discovering that Falcone killed Annika because she learned he was the informant, Selina attempts to kill him, but Batman and Gordon arrive in time to stop her. Gordon arrests Falcone, but the Riddler kills Falcone with a sniper rifle moments later. The Riddler gives himself up and is unmasked as forensic accountant Edward Nashton. He is incarcerated in Arkham State Hospital, where he tells Batman he took inspiration from him when targeting the corrupt. Batman learns that Nashton has planted car bombs and cultivated an online following that plans to assassinate Mayor-elect Bella Real. The bombs destroy the seawall around Gotham and flood the city. Nashton's followers attempt to kill Real at her victory celebration in an arena, but Batman and Selina stop them. Batman saves the crowds in the flooding arena from electrocution and leads them to safety. In the aftermath, Nashton befriends another inmate while Selina deems Gotham beyond saving and leaves. Batman continues to aid the city's recovery efforts and vows to inspire hope in Gotham rather than exacting vengeance. After Ben Affleck was cast as Bruce Wayne/Batman for the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, franchise in 2013, he began developing a standalone Batman film for him to star in, which Warner Bros. Pictures announced in October 2014. Affleck was also attached to direct and co-write the script with Jeff Johns by July 2015, and they finished the first draft in March 2016. In October, Affleck revealed the film was titled The Batman. A planned sequel to the DCEU team-up film Justice League, 2017, was later delayed to accommodate The Batman, but the reception to the earlier DCEU film Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, 2016, co-starring Affleck, prompted Warner Bros. To re-evaluate its approach to the DCEU, which led to Affleck's The Batman being sidelined. Affleck began to have reservations about directing the film, and announced his departure as director in January 2017, but he still planned to star and produce. He cited script issues and felt he would not enjoy directing it. Chris Terrio turned in a rewrite of the script at that time. Matt Reeves, a longtime Batman fan, was hired to replace Affleck as director in February 2017. Reeves reworked the film to focus on Batman earlier in his vigilante career, emphasized the character's detective side more than previous Batman films and separated it from the DCEU. Reeves wanted the Batman to be a noir film from Batman's perspective, and he wrote a new script with Mattson Tomlin and Peter Craig, drawing inspiration from the comic books Batman, The Long Halloween, 1996-97, Dark Victory, 1999-2000, Year One, 1987, Ego, 2000, and Zero Year, 2013-14, as well as the character's earlier comic book runs. Reeves was also inspired by films from the New Hollywood era, including The French Connection, 1971, Clute, 1971, Chinatown, 1974, All the President's Men, 1976, Taxi Driver, 1976, and by the films of Alfred Hitchcock. In January 2019, Affleck confirmed that he was no longer starring due to various personal issues. Robert Pattinson was subsequently cast as Batman in May, which was subject to initial backlash from some fans, and was followed by additional castings later that year, particularly for members of Batman's Rogues Gallery. Reeves spent more time on fewer camera angles, a meticulous process he developed while directing the television series Felicity, 1998-2002. James Chinlund was set as the production designer, while Greig Fraser served as the cinematographer, re-teaming with Reeves after working on his film Let Me In, 2010. 93 The production used the Stagecraft virtual production technology that Fraser helped develop for Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, on the Disney Plus Star Wars series The Mandalorian, 2019-2023, particularly for consistent golden hour lighting inspired by the lighting from In the Mood for Love, 2000. Principal photography began in January 2020 in London, under the working title Vengeance, and wrapped in March 2021. Around a quarter of filming was completed before production was disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, beginning 2 months after filming started. Reeves used the production shutdown to review the already shot footage to plan for the remainder of filming and explored the film's tone, but did not rewrite the script during this time. Filming resumed in September after facing several setbacks. Location shooting also took place in Scotland, Liverpool, and Chicago, along with soundstage work at Warner Bros. Studios Leavesden. Dan Lemon served as the visual effects supervisor, after previously collaborating with Reeves on his Planet of the Apes films. Over 1,500 visual effects shots were created between Weta FX, ILM, Scanline VFX, and Crafty Apes. The editing process during and after filming was particularly challenging due to the pandemic, with Warner Bros. Implementing strict protocols that prevented co-editors William Hoy and Tyler Nelson from directly interacting with Reeves. After initially editing from their homes during the early months of the pandemic, Hoy and Nelson used several Avid editing systems to replicate Reeves's fast-paced, collaborative editing style from isolated rooms on the Warner Bros. Studios Burbank lot throughout 2021. The Batman is the longest Batman film and the third longest superhero film after Zack Snyder's Justice League, 2021, and Avengers, Endgame, 2019. The film was produced by Warner Bros. Pictures, DC Films, Reeves' Sixth and Idaho, and Dylan Clark Productions, on a budget of $185 to $200 million, with Pattinson earning a salary of $3 million. Reeves announced that his frequent collaborator Michael Giacchino would compose the score in October 2019, by which time Giacchino had already written the main theme. Giacchino completed the score in October 2021, and his main theme was released as a single on January 20, 2022. The full soundtrack album was released on February 25. The Nirvana song Something in the Way, 1991, appears twice in the film. The song has a similar bass line to Giacchino's score, which he clarified was a coincidence and explained he was fortunate that his work lied in perfectly against that song. Ave Maria by Franz Schubert is also featured and was performed by the Tiffin Boys Choir, and Dano Reeves released Moody, Red saturated test footage of Pattinson in his Batman costume on February 13, 2020. It included early music written by Giacchino, and generated discussion about the film's approach to Batman. Chris Evangelista of Slash Film thought Pattinson's Batman looked much different from previous film depictions, while Richard Newby of The Hollywood Reporter identified the costume's various references to past incarnations. Newby also speculated the possibility that the costume's bat emblem on the chest could be the same pistol used to kill Batman's parents in his origin story. The footage's use of red also led to discussions of how the Batman would differ tonally from prior adaptations. On March 4, Reeves released an image of the film's Batmobile, which Dino Ramos of Deadline Hollywood felt was sexier and more streamlined than earlier versions, evoking James Bond meets Fast and Furious energy that seemed appropriate for Pattinson's character. Reeves debuted a teaser trailer during the virtual DC Fandom event on August 22, featuring a remix of Nirvana's Something in the Way combined with Giacchino's score. The trailer received 34 million views within 24 hours, and according to CNET's Bonnie Burton and Jennifer Bissett, set the internet on fire. They noted its somber, grim tone. Katrina Natress of Spin and John Saavedra at Den of Geek respectively described its depiction of Gotham City as dystopic and nightmarish. Adam Chitwood of Collider praised what he saw as a genuinely refreshing approach to depicting the world of Batman, with Saavedra writing it made the Batman look more like a detective story than a superhero film. Alex Abad Santos of Vox felt the film had more in common with the R-rated Batman spin-off Joker, 2019, than other contemporary DC films. Abad Santos also noted that some critics disliked the trailer's dark tone, as previous Batman films were tonally similar, but felt the Batman could provide further nuance to his character and thematic commentary regarding carte blanche reactionary violence and retribution rewarded with material wealth. Reeves and Pattinson discussed the film at the Warner Bros. Cinemacon panel on August 24, 2021, where a sizzle reel of new footage was shown. Reeves, Pattinson, and Kravitz debuted a second trailer as the finale of DC Fandom on October 16. Daniel Chin at The Ringer said the trailer had been highly anticipated and felt it did not disappoint. He and other commentators highlighted the trailer's dark, violent, and brutal approach to the character, which Chin felt was consistent with the teaser trailer. Adam B. Very of Variety specifically compared the tone to Christopher Nolan's gritty The Dark Knight films, believing the Batman would be darker and more violent than even those films. Several commentators highlighted Farrell's physical transformation as the Penguin. A Japanese trailer released on December 12 led to speculation that the Joker would appear after fans spotted a figure resembling the character on a newspaper prop in the footage. Warner Bros. Launched a viral marketing campaign in December 2021 with the website rataalada.com. Rata alada is Spanish for winged rat. The website allowed users to engage in simulated conversations with the Riddler, and solving his riddles unlocked promotional material. The final reward for the website was the deleted scene where Batman meets Keegan's Joker in Arkham. A third trailer, titled The Bat and the Cat, was released on December 27 and focuses on Batman and Catwoman's relationship. Slash Films' Jeremy Mathai already felt the film's marketing had been great and was impressed that this was yet another incredible trailer. Asha Barbaschow and Rob Bricken of Gizmodo opined that Pattinson looked like a better Batman than Bale and Affleck, and were intrigued by the idea of the Riddler positioning himself as an agent of justice and the film's potential alternations to Batman's origin story. Warner Media spent $135 million promoting the film, including over $28 million on television advertisements, and licensed a significant amount of merchandise for what it described as the largest Batman merchandise collection in a decade. Batman-related Google search queries independently began displaying a bat signal Easter egg in February 2022. At the same time, a prequel novel, Before the Batman, an original movie novel, was written by David Lumen and was also released on February 1. It explores the origins of Batman and the Riddler. After the Batman's release in March, Reeves announced the DC Black Label prequel comic book series The Riddler, Year 1, 2022-23, which Dano wrote and further explores the Riddler's origin. Special screenings for The Batman were held in Paris and London in late February 2022. The film's world premiere was held at the Lincoln Center in New York City on March 1, 2022, alongside 350 advance IMAX screenings across the United States ahead of its wide release by Warner Bros. Pictures on March 4. It was the first Warner Bros. Distributed film in over a year that did not stream on HBO Max simultaneously with its theatrical release during the COVID-19 pandemic. The film was originally set for release on June 25, 2021, but was delayed twice, initially to October 1, 2021, and then to the March 2022 date, both times after Warner Bros. Adjusted its release schedule due to the pandemic. The Batman was the first superhero film released in China since DC's Wonder Woman 1984, 2020, after multiple others were denied releases in 2021. In February 2022, Warner Bros. Cancelled the film's Russian release due to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Batman was released for digital download and streaming on HBO Max on April 18, 2022, followed by its linear television premiere on HBO on April 23. Warner Bros. Home Entertainment released the film for Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD on May 24. According to Samba TV, 720,000 American households streamed the film during its first day of release on HBO Max. It also had the most successful premiere for any film on HBO Max in Latin America. Samba TV reported that by the end of its first week, the film had been watched by 4.1 million American households. This was higher than the viewership for nearly all day-and-date films released on HBO Max and the second best for a film on the platform during the first week of release, behind Mortal Kombat 2021, which had a viewership of 4.3 million households. The Batman grossed $369.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $402.9 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $772.3 million. It is the seventh highest grossing film of 2022, as well as the highest grossing serial killer film. The film's IMAX performance helped raise the IMAX Corporation's overall first quarter revenue, $60 million, by 55% and its global box office, $173.2 million, by 57% from the same period in 2021. Deadline Hollywood calculated the film's net profit as $177 million, accounting for production budgets, marketing, talent participations, and other costs. Box office grosses and home media revenue placed it seventh on their list of 2022's most valuable blockbusters. In the US and Canada, The Batman was projected to gross $115 to $170 million from 4,417 theaters in its opening weekend, and around $330 to $475 million for its total domestic box office. Tickets for the advance IMAX screenings sold out within a day of going on sale on February 8, 2022. The film made $57 million on its first day in the US and Canada, which included $17.6 million from Thursday night previews and $4 million from Tuesday and Wednesday advanced screenings. It grossed $134 million in its opening weekend, becoming the second film released during the COVID-19 pandemic to gross over $100 million in the US and Canada in its opening weekend, after Spider-Man: No Way Home, 2021. It also became Warner Bros.' highest-grossing pandemic-era film domestically in just 3 days, surpassing Dune, 2021. More than 65% of the audience in the opening weekend was male, while more than 60% were 18 to 34 years old. The film stayed atop the box office in its second weekend, grossing $66.5 million for a 50% drop. The third weekend saw it gross $36.7 million, a fall of 45%, while also making it the second film in the pandemic era to make more than $300 million in the US and Canada. In the fourth weekend it was displaced to the second spot by The Lost City, earning $20.5 million for a drop of 44%. In South Korea, The Batman opened to $1.7 million, the biggest opening in the country in 2022. Through March 2nd, it had earned $5.3 million across 8 countries. In France, it earned $2.1 million, the highest opening of 2022. Through March 4th, it had earned an estimated $54 million in 74 countries outside the US and Canada. In the United Kingdom, it opened to $6.4 million, the second highest opening in the country during the pandemic. It had the second highest pandemic opening in Spain as well, earning $1.2 million. It grossed around $124.2 million by the end of the week in 74 countries outside the US and Canada, and ranked first in 73 of them during the weekend. It earned $22.3 million globally in IMAX theaters, the second highest opening weekend for the chain since December 2019. This was also the highest opening for a movie outside the US and Canada in 2022, the highest for Warner in the pandemic era, as well as the third biggest overall during the pandemic. Additionally, it had the second highest opening weekend of the pandemic era in 16 countries including the United Kingdom, $18.1 million, Mexico, $12.1 million, Australia, $9.3 million, Brazil, $8.8 million, France, $8.4 million, Germany, $5.1 million, South Korea, $4.4 million, Italy, $4.1 million, Spain, $3.7 million, and India, $3.4 million. It also earned the biggest opening weekend for Warner Bros. In 62 countries during the pandemic and its biggest ever opening weekend in 7 countries. The film earned $66.6 million from 76 markets outside the US and Canada in its sophomore weekend for a 42% drop, including a $3.2 million opening in Japan. The film reached the $500 million milestone on March 17, becoming the 8th pandemic-era film to do so, while also becoming Warner Bros.' highest-grossing film during the pandemic. In its third weekend, it made $49.1 million in countries other than the US and Canada, a drop of 46%. In China, it opened to a $11.8 million weekend according to Artisan Gateway, while 30 to 43% of the theaters were closed, the best opening in the country for an American film in 2022, acquiring the top position at the box office. It grossed $25.3 million during the fourth weekend for a fall of 49%, including $3.1 million in China, where it was displaced by Moonfall. It crossed the $750 million milestone on April 17, becoming the 5th pandemic-era film to do so, with the largest running total countries being the United Kingdom, $53.2 million, Mexico, $30.7 million, Australia, $27 million, France, $25.9 million, Brazil, $22.6 million, China, $22.5 million, Germany, $18.9 million, Spain, $11.8 million, Italy, $11.2 million, and Japan, $10 million. Critics hailed The Batman as one of the best Batman films and a revival of the franchise, praising Reeves's grounded direction and focus on the titular character, the noir detective narrative, Pattinson and Kravitz's performances, the cinematography, and the score. However, the dark, serious tone and the long runtime received mixed responses, while the third act drew some criticism. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, 85% of 526 critics gave the film a positive review and an average rating of 7.7/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, "A grim, gritty, and gripping super-noir, The Batman ranks among The Dark Knight's bleakest and most thrillingly ambitious live-action outings." Metacritic assigned the film a weighted average score of 72 out of 100, based on 68 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave it an average of A on an A to F scale, while those polled at Post-Track gave it an 87% positive score and 4.5 out of 5 stars, with 71% saying they would definitely recommend it. IGN contributor Alex Steadman rated it 10 out of 10, commending its accuracy to the comics, the performances of Pattinson and Kravitz, and the film's production values. He particularly noted the chemistry between Pattinson and Kravitz, calling Kravitz's performance the best in the film. Adam Naiman of The Ringer favorably compared the film's technical aspects and visual style to works by Alfred Hitchcock. However, he criticized the final act and found the climax underwhelming, feeling it echoed Joker, 2019, too closely. Despite these critiques, Naiman appreciated how the film handled Batman's psychology. Jason Mottram of The National called it one of the darkest and most compelling comic book movies of the modern era, hailing the performances, action, and story, particularly Reeves's portrayal of the Penguin and Batman as the world's greatest detective. Digital Spy reviewer Ian Sandwell highlighted the film's film noir vibes and strong production values, lauding its focus on Batman as a detective, which he felt justified the runtime. Clarice Luffrey from The Independent admired the visual aesthetic for blending realism with gothic elements, but felt the runtime was excessive, and rated it 4 out of 5. David Rooney of The Hollywood Reporter praised the film's intelligent, emotionally nuanced storytelling, its exploration of institutional corruption, and its unique gothic identity, though he wished for more levity. Peter DeBrugge at Variety admired the film's noir elements and its interrogation of the superhero concept, finding it relevant to contemporary issues. Alex Abad Santos of Vox appreciated the film's detective-oriented story and exploration of Batman's character. However, some critics were less enthusiastic. Richard Brody of The New Yorker liked the first 2 hours but felt the characters were underdeveloped, reducing the impact of the climax. Ann Hornaday from The Washington Post rated it 1.5 out of 4, criticizing its dark visuals, runtime, and reliance on dialogue, although she appreciated Pattinson's performance. Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle also gave a negative review, finding the political commentary and tone unvaried, and criticizing the film's length. Similarly, A.O. Scott of the New York Times praised the performances and score but found the dark visuals and exposition overwhelming. Kim Newman of Sight and Sound criticized the film's length and felt the secondary characters were underdeveloped, although he enjoyed the detective aspects and visual elements. At the 95th Academy Awards, The Batman received nominations for Best Sound, Best Makeup and Hair Styling, and Best Visual Effects. The film's other nominations include 4 British Academy Film Awards and 3 Critics' Choice Movie Awards. Class conflict is a central concept featured in The Batman, with Marco Vito Otto of Collider asserting that the main theme is social inequality. 3 of the primary characters, Batman, the Riddler, and Catwoman, are orphans from different economic backgrounds. Whereas Batman grew up in privilege, the Riddler only knew torment, while Catwoman experienced hardship. The Riddler's frustration with his upbringing leads to him lashing out against the wealthy, reflecting that criminality is born from desperation. J.M. Muteri of the AV Club and Susanna Polo of Polygon said the Riddler falls into the trap of villains who are right, opining that he is correct to expose the corruption that has harmed the unfortunate. Krishan Baker of Inverse added that the film never frames the Riddler's frustration as wrong, though Brandon Zachary of Comic Book Resources argued that the Riddler is inherently wrong to think that change can be achieved through violence even if his motivations are understandable. Zachary wrote that Batman, Catwoman, and the Riddler's upbringings give each character a different worldview. Batman's is narrow and binary, the Riddler adopts a bitter and cruel method to fight corruption that harms innocents, and Catwoman acknowledges the corrupting power of wealth but only becomes violent when her friends are harmed. The film draws parallels between Batman and his adversaries, the Riddler and Catwoman, who serve as foils to the character. Adam Naiman of The Ringer felt the film highlighted the themes of duality between Batman and his foes, and opined that Batman and the Riddler feel like secret siblings rather than 2 different case studies in forlorn orphan psychology. Catwoman and the Riddler make Batman realize that poverty and inequality are the roots of Gotham's troubles, and inspire him to become an agent of hope and use his wealth to prevent social inequality. Baker wrote that the film ends with Batman realizing he has to fight for the will of the people, amongst the people, against the very same institutions that make hollow promises to protect them. Krishan Baker of Inverse said that previous Batman films tend to reflect right-wing themes, with directors Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan's adaptations respectively featuring libertarian and vaguely authoritarian depictions of Batman. The Batman departs by questioning Batman's ethics and focusing on his material wealth. The film highlights that Batman's wealth does not alleviate his suffering and explores the idea that he should be more philanthropic. Initially, Batman does not realize he is taking his wealth for granted and could be using it to help Gotham. The AV Club's J.M. Muteri felt the Batman was more direct in addressing the issue than previous Batman films, but circumvents this argument by portraying Thomas Wayne's attempt at philanthropy as only leading to corruption. Baker felt the film directly addresses the issue by having progressive mayoral candidate Bella Real confront Bruce about his wealth. Conversely, The Ringer's Adam Nayman argued the film does not focus on his class as much as previous films did because he is depicted as a recluse. The Batman also explores grief, trauma, and the horror of living with post-traumatic stress disorder through Batman. Batman's initial antagonism towards Alfred and apathy towards Catwoman's situation stem from the death of his parents and his inability to communicate with people due to his fear of suffering more emotional pain. His obsession with solving the Riddler case is a method of coping with the trauma of losing his parents. In contrast, his obsession with being Batman is the result of channeling his rage into what Marcus Shorter of Bloody Disgusting called a dogmatic dedication to his chosen crime-fighting craft. The film concludes with Batman recognizing that he must process his trauma to help improve Gotham. 216 Batman's relationship with law enforcement differs from that in previous Batman films. Burton's films depict the police as an incompetent force that Batman supersedes, while Nolan's films depict them as willing to bend the law to assist him. The Batman portrays Batman as having a hostile relationship with the Gotham police, who view him as a criminal. Baker said that every time Batman interacts with the police, there's a palpable sense of discomfort. To them, Batman represents a level of oversight that they're not used to having to contend with. The Batman is intended to start its own film trilogy and shared universe called the Batman Epic Crime Saga, which also includes the spin-off television series The Penguin, 2024. DC Studios has classified these as part of its DC Elseworlds label, remaining set in a separate continuity from its franchise, the DC Universe, DCU. DC Studios did consider integrating Pattinson's Batman and Reeves's plans into the DCU before rejecting such a notion. Reeves has plans for multiple film and television spin-offs from the Batman centered on members of Batman's Rogues Gallery. The Batman, Part 2 is scheduled to be released on February 18, 2028, with Reeves returning as the director and co-writer with Mattson Tomlin. The sequel was announced in April 2022, but production was delayed multiple times while Reeves meticulously worked on the script, which was completed in June 2025, and filming started a year later. Pattinson returns alongside Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon, Andy Serkis as Alfred Pennyworth, Colin Farrell as the Penguin, Jamie Lawson as Mayor Bella Real, and Gil Perez Abraham as GCPD Officer Martinez, with Barry Keoghan also expected to return as the Joker. They are set to be joined by Sebastian Stan as Harvey Dent, Scarlett Johansson as his wife Gilda, and Charles Dance as his father, Charles Dent, alongside Sebastian Cook and Brian Tyree Henry in undisclosed roles. Part 2 focuses on Batman's Bruce Wayne alter ego, more than previous Batman films, as he investigates another case that explores further corruption and division within Gotham City in the aftermath of its flooding. The spin-off television series The Penguin ran for 8 episodes on HBO from September 19 to November 10, 2024. The series explores the Penguin's rise to power in Gotham's criminal underworld following the events of the Batman. Farrell stars as the Penguin 234 and was an executive producer with Reeves, Clark, showrunner Lauren L. E. Frank, and lead director Craig Zobel. HBO Max was developing the series by September 2021 and ordered it as a limited series in March 2022, after the Batman's release. Reprising their roles from The Batman in The Penguin are Jamie Lawson as Bella-Real, Peter MacDonald as William Kenzie, and Con O'Neill as Mackenzie Bach, while Mark Strong portrays a younger Carmine Falcone, and Clancy Brown plays Salvatore Maroni. Another spin-off series centered on the Gotham City Police Department, GCPD, entered development at HBO Max in July 2020. Terrence Winter was hired as the showrunner for the police procedural prequel series, which would be set during Batman's first year fighting crime. The series would focus on the corruption in Gotham and the GCPD, and follow a particular crooked cop in a battle for his soul, inspired by the film Prince of the City, 1981. Winter left due to creative differences in November, and was replaced by Joe Barton in January 2021. HBO still had creative issues with the project, especially with its protagonist being a corrupt cop, and encouraged Reeves to focus on existing comic characters instead. In March 2022, Reeves said the series was on indefinite hold, but that initial work led to a new series based on the Arkham State Hospital, envisioning a horror tone, depicting Arkham as a haunted house while building upon its introduction in the film, and exploring the origins of different characters related to it. Showrunner and director Antonio Campos was developing the Arkham series for the DCU by that October, when the GCPD series was being developed again. Both series were no longer moving forward by July 2024, though some elements of the GCPD series were integrated into the Penguin. The boy Bruce Wayne was eaten from the inside. The man Bruce Wayne is but a husk. The Wayne Empire is crumbling, its king a recluse. He broods in his mansion, counting the hours till darkness. Till he dons his cowl and becomes his true self. His father loved Gotham City. Loved it, perhaps, too much. He ran for mayor. He founded a charity with $1 billion of his own funds, hoping it would transform the city. And then, with a trigger pull, he was gone. Thomas Wayne and his wife were shot dead, their 10-year-old son left alone with their bleeding, cooling bodies. That act of violence pushed that boy, young Bruce, to take his father's legacy in a different, darker direction. As the Batman, he haunts the streets like a righteous demon, striking fear in the hearts of its sullied men. He doesn't lurk in the shadows, he tells us, he is the shadow. And from its inky folds he strikes without warning. In the vacuum Thomas Wayne left, the Batman stepped in. And he hopes to make the city better one beatdown at a time. But is he making Gotham better? The Batman can't say. Night after night, he metes out his brutal justice. Day after day, the news blasts remind him how much injustice was done, how much more there is to do. Better because of Batman? Perhaps in small ways, yes. But overall, things seem to be getting worse. Take the city's latest killer, a man who, like Batman, wears a mask. He, too, makes use of the shadows in his case, the dark recesses of the internet, posting sermons filled with righteous rage and murderous intent, almost as if he thought he was Gotham's own Passover angel, sweeping up the unrighteous in his bloody quest to cleanse. The mayor is first killed on Halloween while his own son was out trick-or-treating. The little boy found the body tied to a chair, his head bandaged in duct tape. Someone had cut off the mayor's thumb. The killer says he won't be the only person to pay for past crimes. His work, the murderer says, is just getting started. These are dark days indeed, filled with opaque ciphers and inky black clues. And Gotham will get a whole lot darker unless Batman, called by some the world's greatest detective, can bring a little light to bear on the case. Gotham City just might be the most corrupt, slimy city this side of Gomorrah. The rot runs deep. But Gotham does have a few things going for it. One, of course, is Batman. While the superhero we meet here is unquestionably flawed and conflicted, he is trying to do what's right for the city no matter the physical cost or the mental and emotional toll. And even as the Riddler poses question after question to him, Batman is struggling with a question of his own: what sort of figure does he want to be? What sort of hero does Gotham truly need? And as this question grows more and more important, Batman finds himself doing something that all of us struggle to do, pushing himself toward positive change. He's not all alone in wanting to help the city and serve a little justice. Assistant Commissioner Gordon is one of the few folks in the upper echelons of Gotham who isn't corrupt, and he's going to get to the bottom of this case, even if his own superiors would rather he just ease off the throttle. Gordon forms an alliance with Batman, which suggests that both men are reasonably decent judges of character. And while Batman takes on the lion's share of physical risk, Gordon's putting his neck on the line in plenty of other ways. Alfred, Bruce Wayne's dutiful butler, does his best to steer the brooding billionaire into a more positive state of being. Not easy, that, even as he supports Bruce's alter ego in his detection work. Alfred is the closest thing to family that Bruce has had in his life since his parents' murder, and Bruce comes to appreciate that in greater measure. The Riddler, obviously Batman's main antagonist here, seems to see himself as truly an Old Testament-like instrument of justice, and most of his diatribes have a certain, if mostly unspecific, biblical flavor to them. He talks about washing the city's sins clean and forcing the guilty to atone for their wrongs, thundering like a masked Moses at the sight of a gilded calf. He also trots out references to the sins of the father, which points to Exodus 20:5, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I the Lord your God am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation." Never mind that the Bible also says, in several locales, that every person's sin is his or her own, and that kids aren't punished for their parents' misdeeds. The classic song Ave Maria, about the Virgin Mary, is used frequently in the Batman, even serving as a sort of clue. A funeral takes place in a towering cathedral. Riddler's not the only longtime Batman nemesis on screen. Catwoman, a Batman villain who nevertheless often allies and flirts with the Caped Crusader, plays an important part in the film as well. And indeed, the two seem to harbor a mutual attraction. The couple kiss on occasion but go no further. We see her alter ego, Selina Kyle, disrobed down to her underwear, as Batman spies on her outside her window, and she wears plenty of tight, revealing attire elsewhere. At a nightclub, she flirts with a patron, touching the man's thigh as she plies him for information. She also runs into a gangster named Carmine Falcone, and the tone of their conversation suggests they were once in some sort of relationship. Selina rooms with another woman who works at the club, who is also shown in revealing outfits. Selina calls her babe at one point, but there's no other suggestion the two are anything more than friends. For those expecting Avengers-like levels of violence here, think again. While the Batman is not particularly bloody, the violent vibe of the film feels less superhero flick and more like an R-rated crime thriller. Case in point, the murdered mayor. We see the murderer half chop, half bludgeon the victim with a sharp handheld instrument, then throw the bloody tool aside before pulling out a strip of duct tape. Stage 2 of the killing. It's suggested that the man is smothered to death. As mentioned earlier, he loses his thumb in the process, and the digit is later found and dangled. Another victim is filmed wearing odd, cage-like headgear that also holds a pair of rats with the intention that the rodents will devour the terrified man's face. We later see the briefest glimpses of crime photos that apparently show the damage. A third victim has a bomb strapped around his neck. And in a scream-like twist, the victim is forced to answer a series of questions in an effort to save his own life. People are shot and sometimes die from their wounds. Bombs explode, leading to loss of life and tons of property damage. A character is seriously injured by a bomb. A dead body is discovered in a car. A reckless car chase on Gotham's highways surely causes tons of unseen casualties and at least one spectacular fireball. A massive flood destroys much of the city and presumably kills many citizens. Those flood waters wash into an arena where many survivors retreated to get away from the deluge. Batman is attacked by countless bad guys during the course of the film. He's shot repeatedly, and while his armored suit protects him from serious damage, it's still obviously painful, and a shotgun blast to the torso nearly knocks him out of the fight. He takes part in plenty of fisticuffs, too. One scrum with several assailants culminates in a Batman device literally shocking someone into submission. At another juncture, Batman punches a man repeatedly and almost madly, until the guy's face is a bruised and bloodied mess. He also punches a law officer in the face, too, though with the officer's permission. "You could have pulled that punch," the policeman later says. "I did," Batman tells him. When we see him shirtless at one point, we see scars and bruises from some of his countless encounters with the underworld. Someone careens through the air using a flying suit but comes to a pretty harsh and ordinarily bone-breaking landing. We hear about a time when Thomas Wayne, a doctor, patched up a wounded gangster on his dining room table. We also hear about a past murder. People fall from some significant heights, though many are snared by cords and thus suspended upside down. Bad guys threaten innocent civilians, and we see a replay of an attack on a Gotham citizen. People are leg-whipped to the ground. Batman and Catwoman engage in a fracas or two. Dozens of people rally to perpetrate a mass killing. The drug trade lies at the heart of the movie's misadventures. In fact, a massive drug bust made several years before becomes the branch on which the Riddler's web is spun. The drugs in question are called drops, and addicts are referred to as drop heads. We see a laboratory where drops are manufactured. It looks quite a bit like a movie-based cocaine refinery or meth lab, and hear about how lucrative the business is. Other people at a club use the drug, so named because it's delivered via drops in the eye, and offer it to others. One man wears a drop mask, and we see logos representing the drug, too. Batman injects himself with an unknown green substance that acts an awful lot like adrenaline, enough to get him out of a tight spot and fight on. The Riddler's methods are horrific. But he is, in his own twisted way, trying to bring the misdeeds of others to light. Corruption coats Gotham like an oily film, and we see that many of the city's leaders have been soiled by it. Lies, graft and corruption are all part of the stew, as well as many a failed promise. And, of course, it's not just past misdeeds on display. Characters lie, steal, and commit many other crimes as the film goes on. Some of those misdeeds are implicitly condoned by the movie, of course. Batman is, after all, a vigilante, committing crimes, assault and reckless driving, to name just a couple, to catch criminals. This three-word statement gets to the textured core of the Batman. Batman's description of himself is accurate at that early juncture. He is indeed the Dark Knight of lore, an avenging slinger of batarangs and bringer of pain. And let's be honest, Batman is indeed cool in this, his most primal guise. But the film asks a really interesting question, one that Batman himself asks at the outset. Does vengeance do any good? Could it even be counterproductive? This is a theme that other Batman films have flirted with, but none have delved so deeply into those ramifications. The Riddler, in a sense, is Batman's ethos taken a few steps beyond. If Two-Face, another famous Batman villain, believes that chance is the world's only justice, and Joker just laughs in the face of the very concept, the Riddler here cares about justice, though he doesn't care how many people he has to kill to unleash his definition of it. He sees himself as the good guy. And because Riddler himself feels like he and Batman are kindred spirits, that forces Batman to consider just what sort of hero he is and what sort of hero he should be. This film is dark, no question. It can feel incredibly brutal. It is, without a doubt, the most profanity-laden PG-13 superhero movie I've ever seen. This film is as grim as a deserted road through Nevada, as dark as 4 a.m. But when you hit 4 a.m., you might just see a tiny glimmer of light on the horizon, too. In the midst of all this cinematic darkness, that glimmer of light is Batman himself. He holds true to his historic principles and makes a turn towards something better. He doesn't just want to be the shadow that people fear, but a figure that can offer hope. He realizes, and we do, too, that as necessary as justice is, it must be leavened with a bit of kindness. Charity. Love. Growing up, Batman was my favorite superhero. I loved that he used his wits as well as his fists to solve crimes with no superpowers whatsoever. Over the past few years I had grown mildly less enamored with the character, as we've had so many iterations of Batman that it was hard to come up with something we hadn't seen before. The trailers to this movie from director Matt Reeves piqued my interest again, promising more detective work from the Caped Crusader but also showing him beating up thugs, which are the two things we love to see him do the most. Riddle me this. Can I go through this entire review without using the words dark, gritty, or grounded like every other review has said? You'll see. I thought the Batman would feel similar to Nolan's movies, but it manages to create its own atmosphere, feeling like the comics brought to vivid life. We finally get to see Detective Batman, which we've admittedly seen in small doses before, but this has a classic noir vibe at times, with Bruce providing a moody voiceover. It only happens at the beginning and the end, so it's never intrusive like it could be. In the Batman, Gotham is falling apart at the seams, and the film has this underlying feeling of unease throughout, with criminals everywhere ready to pounce on unsuspecting victims. The whole opening 20 minutes establishing the world has you on edge, giving off a 70s movie vibe like Death Wish, with random scary thugs on subways looking for lone civilians to attack. It's endless night with constant rain, giving the city a claustrophobic feel, making it almost a character in itself. This was my favorite aspect of the entire film, and I love the scenes of criminals realizing Batman could be near and that they are terrified of him. As much as I enjoyed the rest of the film, it was this part which sticks with me the most. The police are unsure of this freak in a bat costume who walks onto their crime scenes, so they are mostly distrustful towards him, aside from clean cop James Gordon, played by the always pitch-perfect Jeffrey Wright. He captures the spirit of Gordon and could quickly become one of my favorite versions of the character. This takes place in year 2 of Bruce Wayne being Batman, so we don't have yet another origin story, which is a breath of fresh air. It's just him being Batman and doing what he does best. But what of Batman himself? Many complained about Robert Pattinson as soon as he was announced because he starred in Twilight, forgetting that he has done many films since, like The Lighthouse, so he has long since proven himself a talented actor. He spends the majority of this movie in the bat costume and nails every scene. The voice is spot on and not ridiculous like Christian Bale's could be. He also looks the part in the action scenes and comes across as suitably intimidating, even if he didn't bother to particularly bulk up for the role. I'm not sure where he ranks yet in terms of the live-action Batman, but he's certainly better than George Clooney. The scenes where he plays Bruce requires him to brood a lot, which he has been able to do since his Twilight days. We never see the billionaire playboy Bruce, but I think that will be an ongoing arc in potential future movies. I would like in any possible sequels if they differentiate the personas a bit more, as Bruce Wayne basically just mopes around as a recluse and speaks exactly like Batman in a whispery voice, so you'd think someone like Gordon would notice that. Zoë Kravitz was wonderful as Selina/Catwoman, and she had real chemistry with Rob on screen. She was different from Anne Hathaway, who never felt like Catwoman anyway, and Michelle Pfeiffer, making her the most sympathetic version of the character we've seen to date. Personally, Michelle is still my favorite incarnation, as she brought the right amount of crazy and sexy, making her unpredictable and feral. In an interesting piece of timing, this week marks the 15th anniversary of David Fincher's Zodiac, and as we've all seen from the trailers, the Batman feels very much inspired by that particular killer. The Riddler has never been more threatening, with Paul Dano coming across as unhinged and genuinely scary. This is a far cry from Jim Carrey's antics, and the character has never been so twisted. I knew Dano would be perfect for this role after seeing him in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, where he plays a similarly damaged character. It could be argued that he does overdo it at some points, especially in the latter stages, but we do need to have some theatricality, and it just makes him seem even crazier. Before seeing the film, I wasn't sure how I felt about his gimp mask look, but after viewing it in context, it worked and just made the character even more unsettling. One of the underappreciated characters in the movie is Carmine Falcone, played by John Turturro, who is understated but still menacing, rarely taking off his sunglasses so you never know what he is thinking, which makes him all the more sinister. In terms of flaws, there is no reason for a Batman movie to be 3 hours long. I wish filmmakers would get back to telling stories in less than 2 hours. I'm middle-aged now and my bladder just isn't what it used to be. I also thought that it is occasionally funny just how serious it takes itself. I mean, this is about a guy who dresses up as a bat to fight crime, but on the flip side it is a Batman movie, so that's what we've come to expect. We do get a few laughs, mostly from Colin Farrell, who for me nearly steals the picture as the Penguin. I still can't believe that's him under that makeup, so there needs to be some awards recognition for that. This is a different kind of Penguin, reminding me somewhat of Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, so some may not like that it strays from the comics, but I enjoy unique takes on characters, otherwise why bother? I will likely get a tirade of abuse for this, but am I the only person who is bored of seeing Batman done in a more realistic approach? We already got that in Nolan's trilogy. I want to see the more outlandish villains like Clayface, Man-Bat, or Scarface in live action, as we've seen Catwoman, Penguin and Riddler done before, admittedly not quite like this, but someone new would be refreshing. It took a while to get here, but finally let's talk about the action. The Batman isn't exactly packed with action, but there is enough to keep things moving, I wish there were a few more fight scenes, but what we get is unglamorous looking and the camera holds back, letting us see everything. Batman himself is truly vengeance incarnate as he beats thugs unconscious, but never kills them. However, the warehouse fight from BVS is still my personal favorite live-action Batman beatdown. Batman is supposed to be a ninja, but we rarely get to see any of that here, as the film tries so desperately to make everything serious, and I personally miss the more fantastical elements. In this he knocks on doors to get into clubs, and that felt weird. He should be coming in through the roof or windows, but again, maybe he will do that in later movies. The car chase which we see in the trailers is fantastic, and I personally love the new Batmobile. It doesn't especially progress the story, but it provides some much needed excitement. The moment it's introduced, our whole cinema shook and the sound managed to make my ribs vibrate. The wingsuit idea was something we hadn't seen before in a Batman movie, and I almost cheered, as my brother will attest. I'm strangely obsessed with watching wingsuit videos on YouTube. The finale is pure spectacle, reminiscent of sudden death now that I think about it, and makes up for any potential pacing lags in the midsection. It also had several twists I didn't see coming. The visuals are at times stunning, creating a grimy, dangerous world, but I found that in certain scenes it would blur around the edges, which was a little distracting, but maybe that was just me. Michael Giacchino provides us with arguably his best score to date, with music that is haunting, romantic, somber and bombastic, capturing the tone of the film to perfection. There is a track on the score called Sonata in Darkness, which is just a 12-minute piano piece, which is something we've never heard in any comic book movie before. The main theme is reminiscent of John Williams' Imperial March and is becoming one of my favorite Batman themes. The Riddler's theme is like old-fashioned horror movie music, and Catwoman's theme is almost James Bond-esque in its slinkiness. I think Danny Elfman's triumphant score to the 1989 film remains the best, but that's just my personal opinion. If you're looking to take the kids to see this movie, I would maybe leave them at home, as this is surprisingly disturbing, and I'm amazed it got a PG-13 rating, as there is some imagery that kids don't really need to see, occasionally reminding me of Saw. Mind you, I was watching RoboCop when I was a kid, and look how I turned out. Okay, bad example. Although the movie is 3 hours long, it's hard to think of any scenes I would cut out. Maybe the club sequence with Peter Sarsgaard could have been excised or at least shortened, but I need to see the film a few more times to get a better idea. Overall, the Batman is overlong and almost hilariously grim, but the story and characters are compelling, and there are some spectacular set pieces. I will wait for home video before I watch it again so I can pause it for comfort reasons, but it is a movie that needs to be seen on the big screen for maximum enjoyment. I need to see it a few more times to see where it ranks in terms of live-action Batman movies, but it's certainly a bold take which will likely have fans and non-fans debating alike. The Batman, 2022 9 out of 10, there was a time when every new Batman movie arrived carrying the weight of not just fan expectations, but an entire cultural argument. Is this one too dark? Too comic booky? Too grounded? Too operatic? Too eager to comment on the modern world? The Batman, Matt Reeves' brooding, rain-soaked take on the Caped Crusader, walks into all of that baggage and somehow emerges better than any Batman film outside of The Dark Knight. And yes, let's get this out of the way right now, Robert Pattinson is excellent. The man understood the assignment. This is a beautifully made film, one with a tremendous eye for mood, texture, and physical space. It gives us a Gotham that feels less like a backdrop and more like a living, rotting organism. It also gives us a Batman who is still early in his career, still obsessive, still half consumed by the job, and not yet especially good at being Bruce Wayne. That last point has drawn some criticism, but here it feels less like a flaw and more like an intentional character choice. This Bruce Wayne is a man 2 years into a mission and nowhere near balanced enough to play billionaire playboy in public. He hasn't developed the mask behind the mask yet. The result is one of the best Batman movies ever made. Not quite The Dark Knight good, few movies are, but close enough that in its strongest moments, you can feel it breathing down that film's neck. Let's begin with Gotham, because the Batman may simply have the best Gotham ever put on screen. The film's use of real locations, including Scottish architecture and cityscapes, creates a Gotham that feels huge, diseased, haunted, and alive. This is not a generic CGI metropolis. This is a city with grime under its fingernails. It looms over the entire movie like a cursed cathedral. In many ways, Gotham becomes the film's most dynamic character, which is exactly as it should be in a Batman story. Matt Reeves understands something a lot of filmmakers miss: Gotham should not just be where Batman works. Gotham should feel like the reason Batman exists. The Batman also borrows heavily from Gotham by Gaslight for both costumes and Gotham itself to great effect. The filmmaking overall is brilliant. This is a stunningly shot movie, drenched in shadows, orange streetlight, rainwater, and bad intentions. Reeves and cinematographer Greg Fraser create images that stick in your head. Even when the movie threatens to sprawl, it remains compelling on a shot-by-shot basis. There is real directorial confidence here, the kind that can make a man forgive an awful lot. He is terrific as this younger, rougher Batman. What is especially impressive is how committed he is to the idea that Batman is not yet a polished legend. He is still figuring it out. Still angry. Still weird. Still so deep into the mission that Bruce Wayne has become little more than a neglected side hustle. That is not only an interesting choice, it is a smart one. We all know what people look like in the first couple of years of a new obsession, whether it is a job, a hobby, or vigilantism. Pattinson plays Batman like a man who has not yet learned moderation, and that works beautifully. The supporting cast is equally strong. Zoë Kravitz's Catwoman is better than expected, sly and grounded without feeling like she wandered in from another movie. Colin Farrell's Penguin, buried under mountains of makeup and sounding like a Brooklyn landlord, is an absolute delight. Everyone is cast well. Everyone understands the tone. No one seems to be performing in the wrong film. The music is also pitch perfect. The use of Nirvana is exactly the sort of choice that could have felt unbearably self-conscious in a weaker movie, but here it lands beautifully. The soundtrack and score help reinforce the film's melancholy, half-decaying emotional world. This is a Batman movie that knows how it wants to feel from frame one, and it commits. Best of all, the film largely resists the now exhausting temptation to turn everything into an extended trailer for a cinematic universe. Batman works best when he is grounded, or at least grounded enough that the city and the crime feel real. As much affection as some of us may have for Batman and the Outsiders, there is a reason Batman generally plays better in alleyways than on a satellite with Superman, Wonder Woman, Hawkman, a pair of super kids, and a purple monkey. Now for the part where I complain, because no matter how good the Batman is, It absolutely confirms one of my least favorite modern blockbuster trends: this thing is too long. What we have here is, in essence, a very good 2 to 2.5 hour movie stretched into a 3-hour runtime. That is not the same thing as saying it is boring, because it is not. In fact, one of the movie's great achievements is that I made it through the entire thing in one sitting without constantly checking my watch or debating whether to finish it later. That alone puts it ahead of some other recent action epics I could name. Looking in your direction, John Wick, Chapter 3. Here is a tighter, meaner version of this film that probably hits even harder. Some of the narrative machinery in the final stretch feels less like organic escalation and more like the movie refusing to admit it has already made its point. The story earns a lot of its gloom and grandeur, but it indulges itself, too. That same indulgence shows up in the Bruce Wayne material, though here I am more sympathetic. This is not a very good Bruce Wayne movie, at least not in the traditional sense. If you want the charm, social camouflage, and strategic public performance that make Bruce Wayne an essential counterweight to Batman, you will not get much of it here. Personally, I think that choice works for this version of the character, but it still means one side of the classic Batman/Bruce Wayne duality is underdeveloped. My biggest issue with the Batman is the ending, or more specifically, the way the ending reaches for contemporary relevance in a manner that feels a little too self-conscious and a little too temporary. Without getting bogged down in spoilers, the film starts taking pages from both Joker and The Dark Knight Rises, attempting to tap into a very specific social and political anxiety. The problem is that the zeitgeist it is trying to bottle already feels slippery, half-formed, and likely to date the movie in a few years. Instead of feeling timelessly mythic, the final stretch occasionally feels like it wants credit for being plugged into the discourse. That would be easier to forgive if the climax were also the film's most efficient storytelling, but it is not. There are character beats in the ending that I genuinely liked, and I understand what Reeves was aiming for. But the action sequence the film builds toward feels like an unnecessarily bulky delivery system for moments that probably could have landed just as well, or better, in a leaner form. It is not a disastrous ending. It is not even a bad one. It is simply the one part of the movie where I became most aware of the machinery grinding away underneath the cape and cowl. The Batman is an excellent Batman movie, a visually gorgeous and often absorbing descent into a Gotham City that finally feels worthy of the character. It features a superb lead performance from Robert Pattinson, terrific supporting work across the board, a top-tier Penguin, a surprisingly strong Catwoman, and perhaps the best cinematic Gotham we have ever seen. Its only real sin is a familiar one: it mistakes more for better often enough to keep it from true greatness. The movie is too long, a bit overfond of its own mood, and not entirely successful in the way it tries to channel modern unrest into its climax. But even with those flaws, it comes awfully close to greatness. The Batman ranks above every Nolan Batman film except the obvious masterpiece, The Dark Knight, and that is lofty company. While it does not quite reach that level, but not many films do. For long stretches, The Batman feels like the movie people had been promising us for years whenever they said, "No, this time they're really going to get Batman right." I watched The Batman, 2022, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoë Kravitz, and Jeffrey Wright last night on Blu-ray, thank you Public Library System. It was basically a PG-13 horror film more than a superhero movie. Pattinson's Bruce Wayne and Batman were both portrayed as terribly dysfunctional. Wayne himself was a noted recluse who ignores the running of his company even at the urging of Alfred, Andy Serkis. The murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne was 20 years ago and the Batman has been operating in Gotham for 2. The real mystery of the movie is how Batman and police LT. Jim Gordon, right, managed to get so close, and how Gordon pulls so much clout that he can get Batman to an active crime scene investigation past 30 cops. Actually, the story begins with the Riddler, Paul Dano, stalking and gruesomely murdering Gotham's Mayor Mitchell, Rupert Penry Jones. The more canonical Riddler tended to range from playful to clever, but while this one is good at puzzles, he's also sitting on a terrific amount of rage. He wears glasses on the outside of his mask, and the moment when the audience realizes he's in the same room as the mayor is when we see a dim light reflecting off of the lenses. The effect is chilling. After Mitchell's death and as Batman and Gordon are leaving the crime scene, Batman sees the mayor's young son, and of course, his own childhood trauma is summoned. We see no flashbacks of this, but after all of the Batman stories that we've been told, we don't really need to see it again to know. Batman is fairly clever in that once back outside, he puts his Batman gear in a backpack and rides around on a motorcycle. It's almost always night or cloudy or raining in Gotham, so he blends into the background. There is a Batmobile later in the film, but it's almost redundant. Following a series of clues left by the Riddler, Batman and Gordon discover that the supposedly squeaky clean mayor was seeing a woman on the side and associating with an underworld figure known as Penguin or Oz, Colin Farrell, who is unrecognizable in the role. Batman beats his way into the club, and while getting no valuable information from Oz, does encounter Selina Kyle, Zoë Kravitz, who, seeing the photos of the mayor with the mystery woman, almost certainly knows who she is. When Gordon plugged the thumb drive with the photos into his computer, a program sent copies to every major news agency, so everyone is looking for her. Batman follows Kyle, finds that she and the mystery woman Annika, Hannah Herzog, seem to be roommates, maybe more, but that part isn't revealed, and that Kyle has another identity. No one ever calls her Catwoman, but she does own a lot of cats, and the mask he wears has subtle cat ears. Batman catches her opening the safe of someone very wealthy and liberating Annika's passport. Eventually, he finds out Annika knows more than she should, and the gangsters took her passport to make sure she wouldn't go anywhere. Back at Kyle's place, Annika is missing, and is later found murdered. To find her, Batman fits Kyle with his specialized contact lenses that work like television cameras to go into the club within the club, the private part of Penguin's empire where the real action happens. It's here that Batman learns how deep Gotham's corruption really goes, but even this is only the beginning. With a running time of almost 3 hours, this movie leaves itself plenty of room to casually explore not only the city's underbelly, but its history going back before Bruce was born. Alfred knows the truth but only reveals it to Bruce after being injured in an explosion meant to kill the Batman. That is the mysterious Riddler's biggest secret. He knows the Batman is actually Bruce Wayne. But then everyone's family has its secrets, including Selina's, which is connected to Bruce's. In the history of Batman movies and comic books, the Dark Knight's Rogues Gallery is always meant to reflect Batman in some sense, but this particular Riddler is truly a shadowy reflection of Bruce himself. Both are orphans, both have a shared history, but where one son grew up with billions, the other was raised in poverty in an orphanage. The Riddler, we never find out his true name, even after he's captured and interned in Arkham, is never seen robbing banks, and he's made a point of not being wealthy, but he has managed to hire a bunch of henchmen to do his dirty work after he's caught and to carry out his ultimate plan of revenge against the city. In spite of the fact that its tone is exceptionally different from Batman Begins, 2005, there are themes of Alfred as a father figure, Bruce being the Prince of Gotham, and the threat of Batman possibly destroying the Wayne legacy. However, where previous Waynes and Batman have, on some level, been approachable and even likable, Pattinson's isn't. He does manage to elicit a kiss from Selina, but in the end, they belong to two different worlds. Where she has been willing to share her secrets, Batman is always behind his mask. Even as Bruce, he's still the Batman, vulnerable, damaged, sometimes even deranged, and no one you'd want to hang out with in either guise. Even Alfred, brilliant in his own right, is understated, almost a muted copy of the Alfreds who came before him. Jim Gordon is probably the most human character in the film, but again, we get no background on him, no family, no sense of who he is besides Batman's friend. This isn't a Batman who would ever join the Justice League, much less found it. His world is too dark and troubled to survive the likes of Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, or The Flash. There is no humor, not even unintentionally. There is passion, but it's ugly or at least troubled. I sincerely hope there's no sequel, because where do they have left to go? It was a pretty good story and certainly the darkest version of Batman to have hit the silver screen. For canon lovers, this one breaks the mold, but not necessarily in a bad way. The one thing really missing was hope. Even in the beginning narration, Bruce doesn't know if he's making a difference. In the end, what has really changed? Although there's no real mid or after credits scene, after the credits have finished, a computer cursor appears with a stylized question mark. Perhaps the last riddle has yet to be told. The critical rap on most DCEU films, especially those with Zack Snyder attached, like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, is that they're too tonally dark. They're often too visually dark, for that matter. While titles like the aforementioned Batman v Superman left me feeling beaten into submission and desperate for a way out, the new take on The Dark Knight from director Matt Reeves, The Batman, had me mesmerized, fully enthralled to the world Reeves created. His film is every bit as dark as Snyder's, tonally as well as visually. Cinematographer Greg Fraser, who also shot Denis Villeneuve's gorgeous 2021 adaptation of Dune, listed Gordon Willis's muted look for The Godfather as inspiration for The Batman. So, why did The Batman work for me where BVS failed? Improbably, I think it's because of proximity to reality. Snyder's films are bleak, depressing, and oppressive. They also don't feel particularly connected to the real world in any tangible way. It's easy to disconnect from them because the worlds created within them feel divorced from our own. The Batman is so hypnotic, and, consequently, so disturbing, because Reeves, who wrote the screenplay with Peter Craig, has crafted a world that isn't ours, but that feels, to my great dismay, like it will be ours in another 3 to 5 years. That feeling is what fueled most of my discomfort and sick fascination while watching The Batman. Foregoing the world's greatest detective's origin story, Reeves set his movie in Batman's early days of crime fighting. Millionaire playboy, the movie self-consciously downplays that famous descriptor of the character. Bruce Wayne has been fighting crime as the Caped Crusader for 2 years. He's established himself in the minds of Gotham citizens, but he's still learning his new trade. When a new threat known only as the Riddler begins leaving cryptic messages for Batman on his victims' bodies, our hero must decipher the clues to stop the killer. That's the biggest and most interesting departure that Reeves takes with his version of the franchise. The Batman is a serial killer thriller in the vein of David Fincher's Seven and Zodiac. It owes a huge debt to both those films. Reeves has said he was inspired by the real-life Zodiac killer when forming his version of the Riddler character. Meanwhile, the greater Gotham area feels overrun with psychopaths. In the opening sequence of the movie, we see a gang of white men, think Proud Boys, on a subway car who target and follow an Asian man when he gets off the train. The nearness of this Gotham to our own reality is established in this early scene. Reeves showcases the real-world ugliness of bigoted assaults on Asian American citizens during the early days of the pandemic, when our then-president disgustingly called COVID-19 the Kung Flu. Batman steps in, as you would expect, to stop the gang from assaulting, and, we're likely supposed to assume, killing, the Asian man. Here Reeves complicates an already famously complicated hero. Much of the film and characters in it are fueled by rage. Batman is no exception. One of the central questions at the heart of the Batman asks if vigilantism as practiced by the Caped Crusader is really any different from the criminal behavior he's fighting. When we see Batman beat one of the white gang members mercilessly and possibly to death, the movie doesn't make it clear. We see that Bruce Wayne is as broken of a person as anyone else in Gotham. The lurid violence Reeves uses in his movie as a signifier of the rage and vengeance that engulfs Gotham is shocking. I stumbled out of The Batman feeling like I knew exactly what audiences in 1971 felt like coming out of the first screenings of A Clockwork Orange. In one sequence, we see the Riddler descend upon one of his victims in order to fit him with a bomb collar. In a preface to one of the later editions of Clockwork Orange, author Anthony Burgess speculates that he invented the half-English/half-Russian slang of Nadsat as a way for him to distance himself from the orgiastic violence he was writing about. In the aforementioned attack, Reeves intentionally blurs the field of vision. The violence that the Riddler unleashes upon his victim is rendered as out-of-focus shapes engaged in unspeakable acts, because showing it with perfect clarity might have been too much. And yet, as with Stanley Kubrick's brilliant and unsettling film version of A Clockwork Orange, Reeves has made a film that is pushing the boundaries of cinema. The Batman is possibly the most avant-garde, experimental art film that has come out of Hollywood since the 1970s. For those of us who have become disenchanted with the Marvel house style, which favors crisp, clean cinematography and is safe for all audiences, Reeves's dark vision sets a disturbing new template for the comic book movie genre. Interspersed between the bleak action set pieces are lyrical passages where sight and sound come together to create haunting visions. Powerhouse composer Michael Giacchino's unsettling score, the main theme features a relentless repetition of only 2 notes, is a big part of the dark tone Reeves has crafted. The cast that the director assembled for the Batman works in perfect concert with the overall effect of the movie. Robert Pattinson's Dark Knight is the most psychologically disturbed version of the character we've seen to date. He's almost wholly uncomfortable as Bruce Wayne, and his obsession with seeking vengeance as Batman is practically all-consuming. The movie feels the same way. We see Pattinson as Wayne in only a handful of fleeting scenes. Zoë Kravitz is mysterious and broken as Selina Kyle/Catwoman. Kyle is initially an outsider, only tangentially connected to the larger mystery within the plot, until we discover secrets from her past that make her a much more central figure than we at first realize. The great Jeffrey Wright turns up in a handful of scenes as GCPD Lieutenant James Gordon, who is committed to justice and teams up with Batman to catch the Riddler. John Turturro is quietly menacing as mob boss Carmine Falcone. I have nothing more to offer other than what I wrote in my notes as I watched the movie, John fucking Turturro. I don't want to be responsible for spoiling it here, so I'll only relate my complete, jaw-dropping flabbergastedness at the actor portraying Oswald Oz Cobblepot, who will presumably, in future installments, ascend to his proper title of the Penguin. I cannot overstate the transformation this actor underwent for the role. Even though I went into the Batman knowing who was playing Cobblepot, I unintentionally saw internet spoilers, I still could not recognize him in any way. The actor plays Cobblepot as a chillingly ruthless and brutal mobster. If we've learned anything from past film adaptations of Batman, it's that the villains are often more magnetic than the hero. Both Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger's interpretations of the Joker are prime examples of this phenomenon. Paul Dano as Edward Nashton/the Riddler is no exception. I could not look away, though I often wanted to, from Dano's Riddler. He is crazed by his rage and his own twisted sense of vengeance. There is one moment in Seven when the vicious serial killer John Doe, as portrayed by Kevin Spacey, screams the word detective to get the attention of his hunters when he is ready to be caught. Dano plays the entire role inside of that scream, to horrifying effect. Aside from the increasing literal darkness within the frame of each movie, the same darkness is engulfing the tone and themes of the films as well. The Batman character is probably the most explicitly right-wing/authoritarian superhero, outside of the Punisher. I was never quite able to get a handle on where the Batman falls in its endorsement of these right-wing leanings. On the one hand, Batman is a protector of the powerless, like the Asian American man we see in the opening minutes of the picture. On the other, he, and the movie, explicitly endorses going around the law, if it means getting results, like when he helps GCPD make an end run around getting a warrant. In a furthering of the "you complete me" ethos from Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, there is also the sickening realization that the Riddler sees himself and Batman as two sides of the same coin. The mayhem that the Riddler unleashes late in the film by harnessing a group of fascistic terrorists, read, MAGA supporters, in another funhouse mirror reflection of our own world, to carry out his ultimate plan makes the thin line between justice and vengeance disturbingly clear. All these ideas were swirling in my head when the most unexpected moment happened. For perhaps the first time in a Batman movie, we see a genuine look of fear on the Caped Crusader's face as he tries to rescue some of the hapless citizens of Gotham from the terror unleashed upon them. That moment gives way to something else we don't often see in this franchise, Batman helping those same nameless citizens out of danger by personally leading them to safety. Matt Reeves has created the most complex Batman film yet. It disturbed me, but like all challenging pieces of cinema, I couldn't stop thinking about it after it was over. There's no argument I can imagine that director Matt Reeves is the Batman, the first in what's undoubtedly meant to be a new ongoing series built around DC Comics' second most iconic superhero, is the best Batman film to date. But I think no argument is necessary that it is the most Batman film, and I'm including here the ludicrous carnival bombast of both the 3-hour version of Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and the 4-hour version of Justice League. At 2 hours and 55 minutes, the Batman isn't as long as either of those, though it is plenty fucking long, but that is not what I mean by the most. I mean how extremely unrelenting the film is, spending all of that running time, or that running time minus the end credits scroll, close enough, at 100%, pounding away as the most over-the-top celebration of everything grim and moody and nocturnal and vicious about the version of the character popularized in the gloomy 1986 comic miniseries The Dark Knight Returns and all the subsequent works that have followed its lead. I will confess immediately that I think the Batman would benefit from perhaps being a bit less. The running time is an extreme problem for the film, which lets its twisty but not exactly complicated story develop at a slow crawl and adds an absolutely deadening finale of 30 minutes or more that picks up after the film has started buttoning up almost every one of its plot lines. So it is obliged to start a new one, and it's hacky, hokey comic book nonsense that might have been perfect in a much more playful film than this one. But a grandiose, indulgent running time isn't even the fatal problem here, necessarily, so much as how little variation the film has across that running time. This is monotonous, in the most denotative, objective, non-judgmental way the word monotonous can be used. It has one tone. Ever since Christopher Nolan first plugged the character into a sober urban crime drama, Batman movies have been the most somber, unsmiling A-list comic book adaptations out there, but even so, this is a uniquely single-minded, mirthless experience. When The Dark Knight came out in 2008, it represented a new bar for how punishingly bleak a major audience-pleasing popcorn movie, but even that still has modulation. There's some sparkling dark humor, the pencil joke, to go in with all the po-faced musing about the philosophy of vigilante crime fighting. The Batman is one thing, and it is that thing hard for 3 hours. This is, to be clear, different from saying that it's an unpleasant slog. One of the benefits of being so damn long and having so much muchness within it, the Batman can't help but hit some of the time. Even much of the time, even most of the time, arguably. Reeves has very clear designs on what he wants to do with this most well-worn of superheroes, and I am pleased to find that, despite what the marketing folks at Warner Brothers have been trying to make it look like, that doesn't include just making a long-delayed fourth Nolan movie. Speaking strictly in terms of the narrative, Reeves and co-writer Peter Craig have very pointedly made this much more of a detective thriller than a superhero action movie, for the first time in his big screen career, unless you want to count the 1993 animated feature Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, and honestly, I think it's fair if you do. Batman is actually obliged to investigate a mystery that doesn't ever, boil down to here is the colorful psychopath who must be punched this time. Specifically, Batman, Robert Pattinson, in his second year of crime fighting, is called in by Lt. Jim Gordon, Jeffrey Wright, to help with the ugly murder of Gotham City's mayor, perpetrated in a crime scene staged as an obvious and not terribly challenging puzzle. And the killer has even left a letter addressed to the Batman, making it even clearer that he views this as a game to play with the Caped Crusader, far more than just a killing spree. And a spree it is, as this figure, who refers to himself, in one of the several crude videos he leaves behind, as the Riddler, Paul Dano, starts killing his way through several of Gotham City fathers. As Batman digs into this, he quickly realizes that it's all related to the city's plague of police and governmental corruption, and somewhat less quickly realizes that it's connected to the city's reigning mobster, Carmine Falcone, John Turturro, and realizes last of all that the Riddler had a very different endgame in mind than just exposing some ne'er-do-wells in high places. That's a bit of a cursory summary, but I don't know that the Batman needs much more than that. It's honestly a pretty straightforward tale, and for all the emphasis on Batman as a detective and not a warrior, most of the investigation consists of him solving an uncomplicated riddle and from that being given a new chunk of exposition from one of, like, a dozen different characters who already know the whole story before the film begins. But the story isn't really what the Batman is interested in. It's more about the plunge into a whirlpool of depravity and corruption that shakes the hero's conviction that there's any actual good to be done in the world. Basically, it's Seven with superhero imagery, and that's certainly not the worst idea for what do with a comic book adaptation, though it's not an idea calculated to do a whole lot for me, personally. The imagery, anyway, now that's what the film is interested in. Reeves is making a mood piece here, a neo-noir in which the ugliness of the story is mostly there to reinforce the deep shadows and dead urban spaces that are the real stars of the show. Even for Batman, this is a dark film. Almost the first thing the hero says is "I am the shadows," and cinematographer Greg Fraser took that as a mission statement to fill the movie with inky silhouettes against washed-out skies that are invariably graded toward browns and bronzes, and huge swathes of underexposed murk. It's obvious, but the movie is never afraid of obviousness. It's going for a thick, pulp fiction nihilism that is meant to be immediately graspable in the big, dramatic visual language of a comic book. And for the most part, it gets there. Again, I don't know if it would have hurt the film to try some other visual strategies, or alternately, to try this one for about 70 fewer minutes. But on a frame-by-frame basis, the Batman looks unmistakably cool, even if those frames aren't all necessarily working together as cleanly as they might. Somewhat less successfully, Fraser also tries out a very aggressive motif of shallow focus, and more specifically of rack focus from one shallow plane to another. Sometimes, this is very straightforward, directing our attention to specific objects. Much more frequently, it's not serving any apparent function at all, though I freely admit that's probably on me more than it's on the movie. I appreciate, very much, a modern studio tentpole, in the aesthetically desiccated superhero genre, no less. That's doing something extravagant and weird with its visual style. But I'd have maybe liked it more if I knew what the hell Fraser and Reeves were up to. Because, outside of that strange visual idiosyncrasy, The Batman is a powerfully focused movie. It's doing just about the only thing a filmmaker can still do with Batman at this point, save for take a big step back to Silver Age camp or Golden Age earnestness, and I would greatly welcome either of those approaches, which is to break apart what Batman means as a symbol within his world, and as a dominant pop culture figure in ours. The film has made two central choices, both of which it clearly marks out in dialogue. It sets this early in Batman's crime-fighting career, and it largely abandons the idea of Bruce Wayne as screen presence. Indeed, one could easily suggest that Batman remembers that he needs to keep being Bruce Wayne or lose his soul altogether is the main character arc of the Batman. But setting this in year 2 of Batman's career is probably the more productive choice, since what it allows Reeves and his action unit to do is to stage some very weird, off-book action set pieces. As long as Batman has fought on the big screen, scratch that, as long as Batman has fought on the big screen, and not in the paunchy middle-aged body of Adam West, his fight sequences have mostly demonstrated a level of brute force efficiency, sometimes mixed with the fluid deadliness of martial arts training. Here, he's actually a bit of a clumsy wreck much of the time, not flowing through the darkness as clod-hopping through it like a tank in impenetrably thick and perhaps inflexible armor. He stumbles and falls, he thwacks into goons rather than neatly punching them. It leads to what are almost certainly the most interesting and fresh fight scenes in the history of Batman cinema, and not till now did it ever really strike me that these aren't particularly good action movies, mostly, notwithstanding the big car chase in The Dark Knight. Because The Batman actually is a good action movie, even a very good one, there are several very fine action set pieces and two actively great ones, an apocalyptic car chase, and a disorienting fist fight in a hallway lit only by muzzle flashes. Anyways, outside of the action, this is all a very glum, heavy look into how morbidly depressing it is to be the Batman. Some of it works extremely well, some of it frankly sucks a little bit, but all of it is bent around that thing. And I would hate to shortchange the parts that work well, such as the extraordinary Michael Giacchino score, an immediate contender for the best thing he's composed outside of his work with Pixar. It's certainly uncharacteristic, oriented around a devastatingly fatalistic four-note pattern. Calling it a motif is almost too generous. It's barely even a melody that plods along with extraordinary weight and scale. One of its first appearances is on chimes tuned low, echoing like the bell of a gloomy cathedral. It's not a trick Giacchino returns to, but it makes quite an impression. Everything about the Batman is heavy and much of it is downright airless, but the music gives it all of the imposing symphonic grandeur and drama that it needs to have the poppy energy of a comic book. It's the foremost strength of a movie that honestly has very few identifiable flaws. It's more that at a certain point, it's hard not to feel ground into submission by just how ponderously self-aware the film is about the unsmiling grandiosity of the material. There are a lot of strengths, but they tend to repeat themselves and thereby lose some of their charm. In the case of the acting, we get a hell of a lot of people who are well cast and doing very committed work that feels trapped by the thinness of every single character in the script. I am very excited to see more of Pattinson's Batman or Zoe Kravitz's Selina Catwoman Kyle, but what they did here is pretty drab and straightforward. The one exception is Colin Farrell's latex-clad Penguin, easily the film's brightest shining source of light. He's not afraid to go big and garish, trotting out a frankly alarming Italian-American gangsta accent that somehow doesn't play as comic or even incongruous, and provides a beady-eyed, bellowing menace that is the closest this comes to feeling like a Batman comic. But anyway, to tie together all of this sprawl, but it is such a sprawl of a movie, I apologize for nothing. The strengths are real, and they're very impressive. But the sheer volume of the film makes even the strengths feel like they're struggling to breathe in a thick fog. I appreciate that Reeves and company are trying to do something new with Batman, even if they're using some awfully familiar elements. I appreciate that nothing whatsoever about this film feels safe or market tested, except that it clearly wants an R rating and had to be good and earn a PG-13. But I would be lying to you if I said that I found the film as a whole all that watchable. I've looked forward to the long overdue prospect of another Batman solo film on the big screen for almost a decade now. Maybe that's providential. The entire DC franchise lives in the shadow of Nolan's trilogy, and I understand why Warner Brothers have dragged their feet on a new solo movie. They were nervous to follow up any rendition of that character. The Batman is in many ways the exact kind of Batman movie that's appropriate under the circumstances. It's a smaller scale film than the previous renditions, but it also manages to keep many of the better elements of the previous two iterations. It comes with the grittier crime drama aesthetic of Nolan's trilogy but highlights the gothic high fantasy aesthetic of the Snyderverse rendition. All the while, it manages to stay in its lane as a relatively modest murder mystery crime thriller. Instead of facing off against massive ninja conspiracies, alien invasions, rampaging monsters, hordes of anti-rich rioters, or Jim Carrey performances, the Batman is smart enough to scale the story back to just focus on Batman's fight against mobsters and serial killers. It's a murder mystery and it never goes overboard with its stakes. The narrative is a Year 2 style Batman story. Bruce Wayne is already established in Gotham City and has made allies within the police department. When the mayoral candidate is brutally murdered, Batman starts delving into the machinations of the Falcone crime family and their associate, the Penguin, to find out how they're connected to the murder. Eventually multiple conspiracies and corruption scandals are uncovered that threaten to bring chaos to the streets of the city. As appropriately modest as this feels in comparison to the likes of Batman vs Superman, I can't help but feel that The Batman is a film that doesn't work. It isn't a bad film, but it is extremely messy and thematically unfocused. Matt Reeves, for all of his incredible talent as a genre filmmaker, isn't a great structuralist in his dramatic storytelling. His movies have major structural weaknesses to them, namely undermotivated characters and weak payoffs. Nothing about The Batman hits very hard. It almost feels safe at times to a fault. There are a handful of moments when the film does come close to genuine tension and risky story choices, but there's nothing here as shocking as Rachel's death in The Dark Knight. It lacks the slow character building of Batman Begins. The story does have a bunch of interesting ideas to play with. Pattinson's rendition of Batman is as an angry young man, a vengeful rich kid who is genuine in his desire to bring justice, but is clouded by his privilege and general lack of experience with the world to see the perspectives of others. The film's nominal story arc, as well as his rivalry with femme fatale Selina Kyle, Catwoman, is to learn how to channel his inner torment to be a symbol of hope for the poor and downtrodden. This feels like Matt Reeves directly addressing many of the core progressive complaints laid against the character in recent years, namely that he's a rich, white billionaire who spends his nights beating up poor people for therapy instead of using his money to support social programs for the poor. Again though, I don't think the film is well structured enough to make these themes work. Selina Kyle may give a second act speech about privileged white males like Bruce Wayne or talk about killing rich CEOs, but it's mostly fluff that's unreflected in the actual plot. Reeves is generally a very intelligent writer, but I don't think the story is justified in how it is laid out. Batman still feels like Batman by the end of the film, even if he has learned a nice moral lesson about helping other people. If this was supposed to be a radical take, it doesn't hit in execution. The Batman isn't a bad movie for sure, but it definitely feels messy. It certainly deserves credit for its amazing production design. Like most DC films, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Man of Steel, Suicide Squad, etc., the film was shot in Chicago, but this film actually manages to transform the city's already Gothic architecture into something that looks and feels closer to the foreboding smoke-filled city of the Tim Burton-era films. It's a beautiful-looking film, and Reeves' action manages to capture some of the frenetic Arkham Asylum-style action that made the Snyderverse Batman fun. As a whole though, the film doesn't totally fit together. About halfway through Matt Reeves' sensational, haunting the Batman, I leaned over to a friend and said, "This is pretty damn incredible." To which he responded that there's still 90 minutes left. I hadn't felt any of that. All I knew was that Reeves' take on The Dark Knight was everything it should be, both a fresh vision for casual fans of the character while deeply beholden to some of the character's best comic book storylines. And most surprising of all, Robert Pattinson's portrayal of Gotham's greatest detective and crime fighter is truly out of this world amazing. The Batman is so far removed from previous adaptations by the fact that it's less a superhero movie than a detective mystery, a crime thriller set in a city torn apart by corruption and privilege. Gotham is what it is. We've seen so many versions of this crime-riddled place, they're tough to tell apart. But Reeves goes the extra mile. Here, the hopelessness has sunk deep into the city's core and into the bones of its citizens. Even its heroes come with a certain amount of acceptance that what they do is futile. Batman might fight for the people of Gotham, but he isn't Pollyanna about his odds of success. Reeves spares us another flashback to Bruce Wayne's parents' murder by an unknown assailant. Their deaths drive him to ignore the family business and focus on his nocturnal pursuits as Batman. In this, just his second year in operation, Batman is more myth and physical presence. The petty criminals fear him, and seeing his bat signal in the air means it's time to scram. The cops don't trust this costumed freak much, either, with the exception of James Gordon, Jeffrey Wright, who seems only to trust him. Wayne has seen his father Thomas's dream of a mayoral run, and the ambitious Wayne Renewal Project, turn to dust. there will be no renewal of anything but murder and crime in Gotham. Gangsters have taken over, from the Penguin, an unrecognizable Colin Farrell, to Carmine Falcone, John Turturro, and suddenly there's a serial killer called the Riddler, Paul Dano, murdering key government and police officials connected to a major case. This isn't the dorky, neon green suit and orange hair Riddler from Jim Carrey's performance. There's no cheesy hat and goofiness rhymes. In an early scene, Riddler hides in the shadows, and savagely beats the mayor to death. This Riddler is closer to a serial killer from a David Fincher movie. His brutality is only matched by his wit, dropping clues to a wider conspiracy, teased in an intellectual battle for the Batman's eyes only. He remains a few steps ahead of everyone, including the Bat. That battle of intellect between Riddler and Batman is another thing which separates the Batman apart from others. Batman's analytical skills, his detective ability, is seen above all as his greatest talent. At times, the film feels like an episode of Law and Order, with Batman and Gordon pairing up to investigate Riddler's many puzzles. There's plenty of action, and Batman throws more than his share of punches, but his greatest weapon is his mind, and that is too often ignored in the comics but definitely in the movies where being cinematic is key. This emphasis on Batman's investigative skills only makes Robert Pattinson's casting more genius. I was skeptical in the beginning, and I think for good reason. Even as a Year 2 version of Batman, Pattinson seemed unsuitable. But this is a Bruce Wayne consumed by his emotions. Regret and rage well up inside of him. He's intense, angry, a bit wild and unfocused. Call him emo if you like, say he's got daddy issues. All of it is true, and the screenplay by Peter Craig and Reeves refuses to spare him. What makes Bruce Wayne think he's so different from the other easily corruptible rich folks out there? Doesn't his money and privilege cut him off to the plight of others, even as he fights for them? It's interesting that in so many Batman stories his money is one of his many assets, but in a place like Gotham where people don't trust the wealthy, wouldn't it be a hindrance? Of course, when the promos prominently tease the Bat and the Cat, Batman's chemistry with Selina Kyle/Catwoman is key. As played by Zoë Kravitz, Selina is different from other takes on the character. That shouldn't be surprised. The Batman is a Bat movie unlike any other through and through. Her performance relies less on sex appeal, although she exudes it effortlessly. Selina is tough, resourceful, and arresting. She's also fiercely loyal, and enters the picture when a friend with ties to the murders goes missing. She needs Batman's help, he needs information. That Selina is a thief who targets the wealthy just like him doesn't seem to be much of a concern, well, at least until she says that he sounds like he comes from money. She holds nothing back, he's completely closed off. And yet they find one another easily and believably. Just look at how their physical proximity during fights shows their burgeoning relationship. They begin as rivals, literally throwing punches and kicks furiously, to later shielding one another, literally, from those who would do them harm. I've never been a fan of the violence as foreplay model that is so often used in storytelling, but it works here because there is trust in equal measure. Reeves' love for Batman and these characters is apparent, as seen in the many nods to stories such as No Man's Land, Hush, and more. But there are just as many references to crime flicks and film noirs from the past, including Chinatown to capture Gotham's seedy underbelly, draped in shadow and despair. This is a Batman movie that, even clocking in at just under 3 hours, never feels bloated. Action perhaps isn't on the blockbuster level that some may expect, but what the action is indeed phenomenal, including one of the best car chases we've seen on the big screen in years, with the Batmobile roaring through explosions that light up the Gotham night sky. Backed by Michael Giacchino's eerie, symphonic score, the Batman is an all-encompassing experience that sucks you in. Beyond Pattinson and Kravitz, performances are stellar across the board. Dano has delivered the definitive Riddler who is terrifying, brilliant, and exudes toxic white male privilege from every stinking pore. Farrell and Turturro are excellent in very limited amounts of time, and Wright brings that natural gravitas that we expect from him. Quietly, Andy Serkis does powerful work as Alfred, Bruce Wayne's mentor and father figure, who sees the path of obsession his charge is going down but isn't sure how to stop it. Of course, time will tell how the Batman holds up compared to its predecessors. But I know when the credits rolled what my gut was telling me. This is the best Batman movie ever made. The Dark Knight remains phenomenal, as well as all of Nolan's films and Burton's first. But the Batman is such a grandiose cinematic achievement, crafted with a filmmaker's skill and Reeves daring to do it his own way. For those who are tired of homogenized superhero experiences, the Batman could be the film that shows them their full potential. I think it seems best to preface my review and analysis of this Batman movie by saying I have never seen a Batman movie before now. I did not grow up with these kinds of movies, let alone going to any sort of movies that had an ounce of violence in them, and so later in life I found a lack of interest and nostalgia when it came to the superhero movies. I knew about this movie because I work in entertainment journalism and it's been in the mouths of everyone for months, as well as the fact that every movie I saw in theaters starting December were blasting the trailer. I thought it looked really interesting from the trailer alone because of the color grade that the movie was used to shoot on, as well as the fact that there was the scene where Batman actually is inverted upside down from the perspective of the quote-unquote victim. I was interested in how that shot specifically subverted the classic shot where a killer stalks their victim. And so when a chance to see it opened up my schedule during a trip to New York, I took the opportunity to be like, yeah, why not? So I saw it at Nighthawk Cinema near Prospect Park with a rowdy audience. Lots of gasps and cackles in this theater. The opening shots of this movie are really intended to instill fear within you. We are immediately introduced and thrust into the world of Gotham City, how it mirrors New York City almost perfectly, and especially within the crime of the world. There are robberies, graffiti, and beatings going down everywhere across the city. It seems to be complete and utter chaos until we see what these criminals are all afraid of, the bat signal in the sky. They look to dark alleys, spaces where Batman could easily emerge to take them down, and the audience can be fooled into thinking he'll just appear at any minute because of how ominous these spaces are. He appears at a subway station, however, to stop a group of clown-faced thugs from beating up a businessman. At the same time, the mayor has been murdered by someone called the Riddler, and James Gordon, Jeffrey Wright, brings the Batman to the scene of the crime. This Batman is very analytical. He uses forensics and basic calculations and deductions to figure out the cryptograms the killer leaves behind. We see more of this when he returns to his tower in the city, where he lives with a maid and his family's butler. There, in his mansion of sorts, we see how they've used technology, including eye contacts that record everything, to help connect the dots. I think that's why I was quite interested in this story. It's mainly a detective story where we're trying to follow alongside Batman as he puts together the pieces behind the Riddler. He seems less of a superhero figure, someone mythologized in comic books and decades worth of movies, and instead relies on intellect. The subplot here belongs to the Catwoman, Zoë Kravitz. Batman meets her at a bar run by the Penguin, Colin Farrell, who I didn't even recognize or realize it was him until way after I saw the movie, as she's a waitress there. Her story is that her roommate, who may be her lover, was slightly unclear on this relationship, disappears after finding something out about the higher UPS at Gotham City. They later find her body in a bag. Catwoman's arc is about vengeance and retribution, while Bruce Wayne's is that he turns to being Batman as some sort of a coping mechanism for losing his parents. We don't actually see the act of him losing his parents in this movie, but one of the many threads trying to tie all of this magic together is the fact that the story of the Wayne family is tied into the Riddler's plans. At one point he even targets Bruce himself, despite him knowing he is the Batman, and sending a bomb to his residence, that the butler unfortunately opens. So there is the romantic arc with Catwoman and Batman, but it doesn't work and starts to divert when she watches him beat a man after injecting himself with a strange green liquid. Suddenly they aren't two kindred secrets and they're back to square one, she doesn't actually know his real identity or who he is. And so when the ending comes where they take two different paths, this exemplifies this notion about how different they are at the end of the day. Paul Dano as the Riddler is completely unsettling. I thought he seemed actually insane with a cunning intellect throughout, and when he's finally unmasked he just looks like a normal guy trying to get a coffee while arrested, until he's not so normal. Even at the very end of the movie, as he cackles alongside the Joker in their respective cells, you'd think that this is the guy you'd find murdering you on the side street that looks normal until he isn't. He specifically targets the upper elites of Gotham City because he thinks that they are all corrupt, which he isn't wrong there. At the end of the day, this is a story that can be summarized as black, white, and the gray area in between. Dano's character, the Riddler, was an orphan basically left behind by the people of Gotham and the politicians, which explains how he's jaded, minus the criminally insane part. Batman is the gray area, as he tends to fluctuate between violence and being involved with acts of good, especially towards the end. The only good cop at first seems to be Wright's character, who doesn't seem as corrupt, while all the politicians have their pockets deep with corruption. And maybe even the Riddler is in the gray area. He's a product of circumstance. If he had better opportunities growing up, maybe he wouldn't have ended up like this. The Batman is definitely set up to have the potential for many sequels in the future. There are so many threads and so many questions left unanswered that it seems impossible that nothing is going to happen. The introduction of the Joker at the end implies that this is only just the beginning, especially when considering the fact that the Riddler had such an intense following and said that this isn't the end himself. The cinematography was my favorite part of the film. It was reminiscent of a film noir in color and added to the drab, mental state with pops of intense color. I'm not too sure about Pattinson in the role, however. He's a great actor and he's shown as the Batman, but as Bruce Wayne I wasn't as convinced. He does live up to the memes about being emo, that's for sure, and I think the fact he doesn't talk much with either of his identities adds to it. It fits the story quite well though. I also think the plot had some pacing issues because I didn't feel immersed in it enough and it felt like it was 3 hours at certain points. I find it sort of interesting how The Dark Knight is now widely considered one of the greatest films of all time, or at least somewhat up there. Truthfully, I've never fully bought into that idea. Sure, yeah, The Dark Knight is a really good movie, but up there with the best ever made? I'm not quite convinced. People will talk about how Heath Ledger turned in one of the best performances maybe ever as the Joker, and how the film is less rooted in the superhero genre and more rooted in the crime thriller genre. Those things I suppose I can agree with for the most part. So much attention is paid to The Dark Knight that its predecessor, Batman Begins, and its successor, The Dark Knight Rises, seem to be often completely left behind in contemporary conversation. In fact, I think the near-insane level of hype surrounding The Dark Knight that seems to exist even to this day led me to having impossibly high expectations for it that it just didn't live up to when I watched it. To be fair, though, I have only seen it once, and I did have a pretty bad headache when I watched it, so maybe I got distracted from how good it was or something. I guess all this to say, I'm not one of these people who feels like Christopher Nolan absolutely perfected the character and on-screen mythos of Batman, and to even attempt to try something new with the character would be sacrilegious. I think he did a spectacular job making those 3 movies, and I'm probably making it sound like I'm less impressed by the Nolan trilogy than I actually am, but I'm not approaching the new Batman movie with the preconception that it won't be able to live up to what Nolan did. That being said, when it was announced that the Batman was gonna be released, I felt skeptical at first. I guess the people in charge of making movies changed their minds pretty fast about Ben Affleck being Batman, and now that I look up the concept of what would have been Affleck's solo Batman movie, I'm glad that was all scrapped. With time I've only become more blockbuster rehash weary, and I didn't immediately jump at the idea of another Batman movie. The trailers made it seem like they'd be doing the whole dark, gloomy, gritty thing that Nolan's trilogy had already finished doing about a decade ago. It honestly just felt so unnecessary to me. but the reality is I'll always be interested in popular new movies, especially ones that seem to get positive reactions from audiences, so naturally I felt compelled to go and see The Batman. Not to be dramatic, but it's possible that I prefer this to The Dark Knight. Well, actually, maybe not. But in some ways I feel like this is the movie that people say The Dark Knight is, the deep, thought-provoking, anti-superhero movie that, ironically, it seems like superhero movie audiences eat up. The Batman starts a completely fresh slate for the character, this time played by Robert Pattinson. The film opens up with the murder of the mayor of Gotham City, Don Mitchell Jr. Rupert Penry Jones. The Gotham Police Department, led by Lt. James Gordon, Jeffrey Wright, arrives at the scene to investigate the crime, but so does Batman, Robert Pattinson, the secret vigilante alter ego of billionaire Bruce Wayne. The man who killed Mitchell calls himself the Riddler, Paul Dano, and leaves a clue for Batman specifically at the scene. Not long after, the Riddler kills the police commissioner, Alex Ferns, and leaves a clue for Batman yet again. Batman finds pictures left for him by the Riddler of Mitchell with a woman leaving the Iceberg Lounge, a nightclub in Gotham. He shows up at the club to interrogate the Penguin, Colin Farrell, the owner of the club who is involved in the mob. The Penguin says he knows nothing about the murder of Mitchell, but Batman notices that the roommate of the woman Mitchell was with, Selina Kyle, Zoë Kravitz, works at the club. Kyle agrees to work with Batman when her roommate vanishes. It becomes revealed that the police commissioner worked for the same mobster that the Penguin does, Carmine Falcone, John Turturro, as does the district attorney of Gotham, Gil Colson, Peter Sarsgaard. At Mitchell's memorial, Colson is killed by the Riddler after he fails to answer a set of riddles correctly, even though Batman tries his hardest to prevent his death. It has become apparent that the Riddler is targeting important figures in Gotham to make a point about the corruption of the politicans and the law enforcement of the city. His next target is Bruce Wayne, but the letter bomb intended for Wayne ends up severely injuring his butler Alfred, Andy Serkis, instead. The Riddler, meanwhile, has exposed the shady secrets and past mob ties of the Wayne family. Batman is led further down a progressively darker spiral into the murders and crimes of the Riddler, the mob's control over Gotham, and his own family history. For starters, this is an extremely long and somewhat complicated movie that is hard to even sum up in just one paragraph. In full disclosure, I had to reread the plot of this movie to write my little summary, and in doing so, I read things that honestly I hardly remembered. This movie is about 3 hours long and definitely feels that long. By the time it was almost over, I was definitely ready for it to end. It feels like if you blink, you'll miss key details of one of the countless subplots entirely. There is so much happening in The Batman, which is mostly a good thing I would say, but if you're not someone who likes movies where you really have to sit down and pay close attention, for a long time in this instance, maybe this isn't for you. While the intensely long runtime does drag down this movie in my opinion, it leaves plenty of room for the very well-written script to shine. The Batman is a very busy and packed movie, but it never really feels confused about the points that it's trying to get across. Pretty much every aspect of this movie is effective, the dialogue in particular is almost fully well done. Every Batman movie has some lines from when the titular character is dramatizing himself that feel corny to me, like in this film when he's doing voice-over narration and says stuff like "They think I'm hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike, but I am the shadows." Or like how instead of calling him Batman, everyone calls him Vengeance. I don't know, maybe it's just me who thinks that kind of faux intimidating stuff is corny, but oh well, it doesn't really bother me that much. Generally, Robert Pattinson does a good job playing the Batman/Bruce Wayne role, but I do wish the character itself had been fleshed out a little more. The only real explanation provided as to why Wayne chooses to dress up in the costume every night and fight crime is that in doing so he's carrying on some sort of vague family legacy, but as far as I can tell that has nothing to do with what his family represented at all. I understand the idea that because his parents were killed by a criminal, Wayne grows up wanting to stop that sort of thing from happening to other people, but that idea is never really presented in this film. Wayne himself I also found to be frustratingly undercooked. It's as if he has zero real personality. His inner psyche is never really explored in the way that I feel like it should have been. It just seems to me like the filmmakers never really bothered to explain why Wayne was motivated to be Batman at all. That being said, it is clear that Pattinson put a lot of effort into his performance as Batman, and the rest of the cast was pretty much stellar as well. Kravitz is perfect for her role, and Colin Farrell is completely unrecognizable as the Penguin but does a great job with what he's given. I did like Paul Dano as the Riddler, who at times does cross the surprisingly thin line between genuinely somewhat intimidating and noticeably over the top. There is a lot of screaming and wailing that comes with the Riddler role in this movie, and I'd say about half of it sticks the landing that it's supposed to. Overall, however, I do think the Riddler is a solid antagonist and really brings home the gruesome, shocking thriller vibe that the film seems to kinda be going for. At times his character reminded me more of a villain from a horror movie, specifically Jigsaw with the whole riddle thing, than a villain from a superhero movie. Speaking of the riddle aspect of the film, I felt like it was a nice touch, but some of Batman's guesses about the answers to the riddles definitely jumped the shark in terms of how smart he could possibly be about these impossibly vague clues. Also, I still have zero idea why the Riddler cares so much about Batman in particular finding the answers to the riddles. It's not as if the two have any history or anything. I feel like so far I've made it sound like I didn't enjoy the Batman as much as I did. I definitely think it's a flawed movie, possibly more than other people seem to, but I had a great time watching it and there are a ton of fantastic things this film has going for it. I love how noticeable it is that so much effort was put into making this. You can tell the filmmakers really went all out and had a specific vision that they went for. They wanted a nocturnal neo-noir detective thriller featuring the Batman character, and that's pretty much exactly what they succeeded in making. Like I said earlier, this is sort of an anti-blockbuster. This isn't Batman v Superman. Sure, there are big explosions and action scenes and it is a thrill ride like a bunch of other reviews probably say, but the Batman maintains a certain artiness that the best Batman movies historically have. Burton and Nolan specifically both brought unique artistic visions to their films, and I suppose Joel Schumacher did as well, and Matt Reeves did the same with this movie. In general, I really like what the filmmakers did with this, and I'm glad they didn't make another origin story film. There's a lot of notably good camera work and cinematography in this film as well. There's one shot from the point of view of a crashed car where Batman is upside down walking towards the camera that stuck with me, as well as a shot of him carrying a torch through dark water leading a group of civilians. I also like how the movie opens up immediately with a large title card that fills up the whole screen. It really sets the tone. All in all, The Batman is a more than satisfying experience as a fan of the character's movies and as a fan of film. If you're looking for a moody, atmospheric, thematically dense murder mystery served as a superhero movie, it's arrived. I don't want to compare this to The Dark Knight too much, but if you're a fan of that movie, this should be up your alley as well. The scope and scale of The Batman is so large and grand that I'm not even sure how the supposedly planned sequels are gonna live up to it. How do you follow up a 3-hour epic like that? I'm just glad we got the movie we did, when we did. The Batman also manages to be timely in its semi-political themes and in a way that mostly manages to not be too heavy-handed. It's possible that this movie could have used a little more humor, or a shorter runtime, or maybe even a slightly smaller web of subplots, but pretty much everything about the Batman hits. I'd probably give it an A as a grade. This is one of the best new movies I've seen in theaters in a hot minute, and I'd recommend it to anyone who likes this sort of film. Once upon a time, we were supposed to be getting Ben Affleck's take on the solo Batman film. I was actually looking forward to his cinematic interpretation, particularly given his prior experience in directing notable crime dramas in Gone Baby Gone, 2007, and The Town, 2010. If Affleck's version actually happens, the film would feature Batman pitting against Deathstroke, Joe Manganiello. Too bad that didn't happen when Affleck first chose to step away from the director's chair and then, subsequently exited the project altogether. When Matt Reeves took over the Batman instead, it's all back to square one as the solo film is served as a reboot and even takes place in a self-contained universe, i.e. not connected to the existing DCEU whatsoever. With Affleck already hung up the cape and the cowl, although he would make his final Batman appearance in The Flash, the Batman introduces Robert Pattinson as the younger version of Bruce Wayne/Batman. Frankly, never in a million years did it ever cross my mind that Pattinson would up playing the aforementioned title role. Sure, his decade-ago past as the infamous sparkly vampire in the dreadful Twilight Saga, 2008 to 2012, was long gone, and since then, he did improve a lot in his acting scene in the likes of Good Time, 2017, and The Lighthouse, 2019. But Matt Reeves' decision to choose Robert Pattinson for the role instantly reminded me how Tim Burton made an unconventional choice picking then primarily comedian Michael Keaton in Batman back in 1989. It turned out to be surprisingly a good choice after all, and Keaton was undoubtedly among the best Batman I've ever seen. I was hoping the same for Pattinson too. The good news is, Pattinson does look the part as the young, inexperienced, and reckless Batman. But his overall emo-heavy performance no matter as Bruce Wayne or Batman feels strangely hollow. I get that he's very angry and vengeful and so determined to clean up the city of Gotham reeked of crime and corruption. And yet, the way he acts is kind of one-sided, lacking the necessary emotional depth that could have delved deeper into his otherwise surface-level characterization. It was a waste of opportunity because the Batman also features Zoë Kravitz as Selina Kyle/Catwoman, and the film explored the complicated romantic angle between the two of them. And while Kravitz brings an alluring quality to her supporting turn, there is little chemistry to be found with the strictly and stubbornly morose Pattinson's Batman character. As for the rest of the supporting cast, Jeffrey Wright delivers solid support as James Gordon, while Colin Farrell, looking all unrecognizable in a heavy latex makeup and a fat suit, is having a great time channeling the Robert De Niro-like acting style of a mobster as Penguin. It's just that too bad he never gets to do much to make him a memorable villain. John Turturro, who plays Carmine Falcone, seems like an inspiring choice, but upon seeing his performance on the big screen, he comes across more as a disappointingly dull mob boss. Paul Dano's potentially memorable portrayal of a mentally deranged the Riddler is initially creepy at first when his character is introduced in the film. But as the Batman progresses further, Dano's serial killer character that echoes the respective antagonists from David Fincher's Seven, 1995, and Zodiac, 2007, with a dash of Tobin Bell's Jigsaw from the Saw franchise, looks like he's trying too hard to make his Riddler a standout. The story, credited to Reeves himself and co-writer Peter Craig, The Town, Bad Boys for Life, is structured like a hard-boiled noir, complete with Pattinson's moody voice-over narration and a police procedural-like mystery angle that we finally get to see the other side of Batman as the world's greatest detective. The latter is something that he has been long known for in the comics, but the previous big-screen adaptations always sidelined his particular expertise in favor of a more action-oriented crime fighter. So, I'm actually glad that Reeves addresses Batman's deduction skills in this film. It all looks good on the surface, but his intricate connecting the puzzle storytelling method that involved everyone in the mix feels like he's cramming too many stories into a single film. Even with the nearly 3-hour running time, easily the longest solo Batman film ever made so far, there are times the whole thing feels plodding and eventually overstays its welcomes by the time the third act rears its ugly head. Let's just say, instead of a satisfying or shocking payoff, the Batman increasingly loses its edge with a surprisingly anticlimactic ending. Visually speaking, this is where the Batman excels the most. Reeves has certainly gone all out to make his film looks meticulous with the help of Greig Fraser's stunning nighttime cinematography. No doubt the film is heavily indebted to David Fincher's visual playbook seen in his two aforementioned movies and even 1997's The Game, to the point it was as if Fincher himself served as an uncredited co-director in The Batman. The fight scenes are brutal, even though it lacks the visceral punch seen in the tunnel fight scene between Batman, Christian Bale, and Bane, Tom Hardy, in The Dark Knight Rises, 2012, and the warehouse scene in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Then, there's the nighttime and rain-slicked car chase sequence. Love the souped-up Dodge Charger of the Batmobile, easily the most memorable moment in The Batman. It's all thrillingly staged, equivalent to an adrenaline rush in mostly POV angles from the driver's perspective and side of the car, coupled with the respective close-up shots of the Batman and Penguin. It sure gives me the goosebumps watching the car chase unfolds on the big screen. Overall, I have a mixed feeling about The Batman. It wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be, given the caliber of Matt Reeves' mostly impressive filmography. His 2008's Cloverfield and 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes were the prime examples. And it wasn't a bad film either. Just passable enough with flashes of cinematic brilliance in between. This film, directed by Matt Reeves, written by Matt Reeves, based on characters from DC, produced by Dylan Clark, starring Robert Pattinson, cinematography Greig Fraser, edited by William Hoy, music by Michael Giacchino, production companies Warner Brothers Pictures, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures, release dates March 1, 2022, running time 176 minutes, country United States, language English, budget $185 to $200 million, box office $772.3 million.